Midnight Mormons, mature and childish.
Cult apologia, of course.
I knew you come across as a sweet guy. You kind of look like Shermie the elf from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Don't like to make toys.
You know, naive people doing naive things to try to justify belief.
Waku L, Cardon Ellis, and Brad Witbeck, and then Midnight Mormons, where they get even more vicious and cruel.
Then they fought us.
You are going to be tarred with the same brush as these two, and it will not be good for you any more than it already is.
Because you don't need 20 friends. You just need 3 motherfuckers. You can take over a country. Okay, that's what we're confused as Americans. We think we need all these motherfuckers. You give me 3 bad motherfuckers, and you're finished. You understand me? You're fucking finished.
Brace yourself for another episode of...
That's something that has been concerning me a little bit in the ex-Mormon world. When you leave the moral framework of Mormonism, sometimes you let go of some principles and ideas that, even though they're found in Mormonism, they're not unique to Mormonism, but they're still really important for us to get along in the messiness of life, and forgiveness and grace are a big part of that.
We have a rising generation that is struggling with very difficult questions and are looking for answers.
I know this video is going to get people getting mad at me. I get really nervous when you look off camera like that, quick. Siaka's bringing up a really good point. He says, I want to judge a man for exactly...
Whoa, hey, Cardon.
What?
Chill.
Now, here's where it gets weird, okay?
Ignition in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, sweet, here we go. Okay, I hope all of this turned out right the way it's supposed to. Everybody, welcome to the live stream. Welcome back to Midnight Mormons. I'm your host, Cardon Ellis, and I'm joined today in the studio by none other than Brian Stutzman and our good friend Brad Witbeck, BT Witbeck, Prophet and Apostle 2024.
Do we vote?
Oh, wait, shoot. Hold on. Brad, I can't hear Brad. What's going on?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, good. You had me kind of like stressed out and worried there for a second. When you got so many people coming in from everywhere, you know, in the studio and trying to run it all, gets a little bit crazy real fast. So anyway, okay, so here's what's going on, guys. We got a really cool live stream. Okay. And it all just happened super fast, super quickly. Basically, I give props to a friend of the show, Justin Griffin, the guy who made the film Who Killed Joseph Smith. And we interviewed him. And he told me, we were talking on the phone about maybe possible future episodes that he would like to participate in and whatnot. He did say, you know, in his cool, like, I call it Surfer Dude Ninja Turtle way, you know, he's like, watch out, man. Like, people come out of the woodwork when they see me on a channel. And, you know, and sure enough, a bunch of people came out of the woodwork and I started getting contacted, you know, and one of these people is now another friend of the show. Okay. Brian Stutzman, who actually wrote the book, literally wrote the book on Warsaw, Illinois, which is the town that the mob basically was stationed at and worked out of during the martyrdom of Joseph Smith. And he's got some counterpoints to the counterpoints and some counter narrative to the counter narrative of Jim. And now they can all just debate what really happened while our good friend BT Witbeck, I would say moderates, but you're Canadian, so we automatically think you're cool and whatnot. Also, just to be totally fair and transparent, this came together so quickly right now. I was able to, a couple of hours ago, get in contact with one Justin Griffin, friend of the show and director of Who Killed Joseph Smith, and to actually invite him on. So who knows? Maybe sometime soon into the chat will come our buddy Justin Griffin here to defend his thesis. All right. But anyway, without any further ado, let's just jump right in. Okay. And Brian, you go first, bro. Yeah, just tell us your story, who you are, what's up, and why you're here, and so on and so forth.
Well, I love to talk about the martyrdom, and I am a businessman, and I live in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and about 10 years ago, I got really interested in the town of Warsaw. There'd been a lot written about Carthage, a lot about Nauvoo. They're all 18 miles apart from each other. They kind of form a triangle. And the story needed to be told. Nothing had been written really officially, like this at least, about Warsaw. Little did I know that 9 years later, I thought it would just be put on a shelf. I talked to a few people about the mob and things like that. Little did I know that this past summer, this movie would come out. And all of a sudden, I've had people contacting me to contact you to come back to get on your show. Say you've done.
We are the arbiters of truth.
Yeah,
I mean.
So I started watching this movie.
We've got Brad. So
great.
Yeah.
I started watching this movie. In the first 2 minutes, I had to go get a notepad, and I took 7 pages of notes of things that I thought were either wrong or misleading. I found out that this movie had more holes in it, in my opinion, than the bedroom door at Carthage Jail.
Oh, savage.
So
epic dad joke. Epic dad joke / diss.
So I don't know if you want to talk just for your audience. We assume everybody knows about the movie. Do you want to just kind of a recap on what the premise is, and then we'll just tell why it's wrong?
Yeah, I think
before we jump into that, we did get a super chat asking, are we sure that it wasn't werewolves getting revenge on Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
Brian?
That's maybe a close second, way ahead of John Taylor and Willard Richards.
That's funny.
Nice.
Hold on. For some reason, I can't hear you very well, Brad.
Oh yeah, am I too quiet? Do I need my mic a little closer?
I'm not hearing you through my headphones.
Through the monitor back.
I'm hearing you through the monitors, which is like totally weird. It is not the way this thing is set up to be. Gosh, dang it. But whatever, as long as the audience can hear it, it should be just fine.
So, we have a friend of the show, your show, Jacob Hansen. He runs Thoughtful Faith, right? And he's on quite a bit. I know he's tried to get Justin to agree to talk to me, in a moderated debate or something. As of now, Justin won't talk to me about his movie in public in a forum. So I hope he calls in tonight. I've got a list of questions.
Okay, cool. Well, then why don't you just jump right in right now without any further ado?
You're assuming that everybody knows about the movie.
Yeah, so basically, just for anybody that's tuning in for the first time, there's been a movie that came out made by Justin Griffin titled Who Killed Joseph Smith? And all of us are familiar with the traditional, shall we say, the traditional narrative of the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, in which he was taken to Carthage jail to stand trial for a bunch of crimes he didn't commit of the mob that hated him. Said famously, I go as a lamb to the slaughter, yet I am peaceful as a summer's morning. And fast forward 24 hours later, the Carthage Greys had surrounded the prison, stormed it, for lack of a better term, killing him and Hiram Smith. And that was the assassination / martyrdom of Joseph Smith that sealed his testament in blood of the restoration and so on and so forth, making him much like Benedict, shall we say, in the Book of Mormon. Okay. Justin Griffin comes along and says, hold on, wait a second. Wasn't just the mob. I think based upon, this evidence of the 3 minutes of the storming of the Carthage prison, that actually Willard Richards and John Taylor, who were in the prison with Joseph Smith when it happened, conspired with the mob to assassinate Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. Okay. And some, not Justin himself, but many in some of the movements that he associates with, say that's because these were the polygamists that wanted to usher in polygamy, and Joseph Smith didn't practice that and would have stopped it. So that was kind of like the coup d'etat, for lack of a better term. But yeah, they say that Willard Richards and Hiram Smith did it based upon this.
John Taylor. Yeah.
Or sorry, John. Did I say Will Smith? No, Will Smith smacks people. He doesn't assassinate people. But anyway, they say that it was an inside job, for lack of a better term. Now, you watched this movie and almost had a heart attack. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So tell us about the heart attack.
Your narrative that you just told was almost accurate. You know.
Okay.
It wasn't the Carthage grace.
And as we're trading off to Brian, I just want to answer another question we had here. Someone was asking the difference between an assassination and martyrdom. And ultimately, Joseph Smith was both assassinated and martyred because as a martyr, he was killed for his religious beliefs. But an assassination is generally a killing done by a group or a singular person on a different person.
Yeah,
like they have a target that they go after.
Martyrdom usually insinuates it's like a saint or a religious character or a religious personage that was killed for religious reasons. Assassination kind of has a political insinuation, and murder has kind of a domestic insinuation. All of them are homicide. Okay,
and
you know what
all
I'm
of
saying?
them apply. You know, we talked earlier. Joseph Smith was the first U.S. presidential candidate assassinated while running for office. So there is some political terms there.
Oh, snap.
We need a movie on that angle.
A Mormon prophet. He was a
Okay, wait, what'd you say, Brad?
We need a movie on that angle.
On that angle.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. He's the first. See, now they're protected by the Secret Service. All of the political candidates, once you get to a certain echelon. So, you know, previously he would have had to actually deal with the Secret Service. By the way, side story that's really funny, and we can do this on live streams, is do you guys remember when a guy stormed the stage of Donald Trump and got absolutely iced and tackled by the Secret Service? Do you guys remember that in like 2017, where a kid jumped over the embankments at one of the big concert rallies, and then he tried to jump onto the stage, and this huge Secret Service guy like literally laid him out? Okay, so that guy's in my stake. You know what I'm saying? He's a friend of ours. And what's funny is they were like interviewing him after the Secret Service guy that was protecting the president. They apparently they interviewed him afterwards, and you know, because they want to know, why'd you choose to do this? What was your psychology, so on and so forth. They figured out he was just a punk kid pretty soon. I think they just let him go. But you know, they're grilling him, saying like, why'd you do this? Why'd you choose this way? Why did you come now? And he said, I saw that guy and I thought he'd be the slowest. They didn't realize that guy was like an ex-football star that ran the 40 in like 2 seconds flat. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And he learned the hard way when he got like 320 pounds of just pure muscle that used to be a college football player, laying him out. So anyway, had Joseph Smith had this guy, who will remain nameless, you know what I'm saying? Had he had this Secret Service guy, friend of mine from the stake, next best thing to Porter Rockwell, you know what I'm saying, then he probably would have been okay. So anyway, hit it.
So it wasn't really the Carthage Grays that stormed the jail. It was a mob from Warsaw. So I need to put a little disclaimer in. Keep my family happy. The thoughts are opinions today only. I can back up everything I say, but I'm not here to disparage any movie or any producer or whatever. Okay, is that fair?
Okay, sure. So, go for it. You've covered your bases,
This is my opinion.
Dog.
This is my... The attorneys made me say that, okay.
Okay.
So we went over the movie recap, and, you know, the production quality is pretty good. You know, it's dark, it's dramatic, great music, British voices. They had an error too. One time they showed it the time of the martyrdom, 5:20 p.m. and it was dark outside. So they made a little, you know, it's not a perfect movie, but you know, I'll give them props, probably a 9 or 10 on production quality. Okay.
But
a booming voice and good music does not the truth make.
Okay. So what were your problems, man?
Oh,
Hit it.
Man.
Hit it.
There are a lot of
Just
false
go to
conclusions.
Town, man.
Okay. If he took his, okay, first of all, we got a crime scene, right?
Okay, yeah.
177 years old. Nothing was preserved. If you go to a crime scene a week later, it's going to be thrown out of court as possibly being tainted. You know, certainly not in pristine situation. So the Carthage jail was turned into private hands. The church didn't own it for 50, 60, 70 years. a missionary couple named the McCraes came out.
Okay.
They found out that the windowsill where Joseph fell from was not the original. They replaced that. The stairs upstairs are not the original. They replaced that.
Really?
The door that we always talk about. I read a paper that's alleged that that's not the right door. They found the panel and recreated the door. Okay. So you sit here and you look at the face mask of Hiram Smith.
Yeah.
He was so messed up. They took some cotton. I read last night an account where they took rag and put it in to make the death mask. And you're trying to like recreate a crime scene 177 years ago off tainted evidence? Are you kidding me? That would be thrown out of
well, and that would explain,
out of a courtroom right now.
That would explain an inquietud, as we say in Spanish. That would explain a reservation that I had about that whole death mask, because a lot of their evidence was that it had to have been a pepper box gun at the bottom of the chin because there's no exit wound. Had it come through the front, it wouldn't be in the back, and so on and so forth from skull evidence. But
one shot here at the back and one shot here at the back.
I
don't know. I know that Taylor Smith had a discussion with Justin, and I thought Taylor explained it really well. But the bottom line is, I felt that the movie had a lot of errors. So let's talk about this. They talk about possibilities and theories, and they have Justin had 6 standards that he'd come up with, which would not be my standards.
Okay.
Let's talk about what's possible, what's plausible, and what's documented. So I flew down here today.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm on an Airbus 320, and I thought, has there ever been a time where a pilot has put the airplane on autopilot and actually dozed off, maybe inadvertently?
I know one.
Sure, it happens, right?
Personally, my family lives in Miami. Tons of Venezuelans and Cubans. And we're friends with a pilot. And I told him one day, I said, I don't know how comfortable I feel about autopilot. He says, feel comfortable. The reason why there's 2 pilots is because one always has to be awake while the other one can sleep. Both of them fell asleep coming out of Colombia. I think they were Caracas, Venezuela, and Bogota, Colombia. Sorry. They had doing a flight from Bogota to Miami, and like 3 hours into like an 8-hour, like a 5-hour flight or whatever the time was, he had dozed off. And then the dead had dozed off too. And what woke them up was the alarm saying, we are coming into landing procedures into Miami International. And he's like, we literally flew like 1,000 miles on autopilot. You know what I understand?
Very unusual, because there's cockpit recorders and things like that. They probably
so it's like, it was like in the 90s. I don't know if that stuff existed. But anyway, keep going.
Well, let me just go here. We can talk about things that are possible, but what's really plausible and what's documented? And there's so much. I felt like the movie acted like they came across something brand new, and they didn't. We can end the discussion in about 10 seconds here. I can prove who did it. Okay.
Oh, those are some fighting words.
Now, Brad, let me ask you, when Joseph Smith either fell or jumped, there's different accounts, from the Carthage window, he said, "Oh Lord," what did he say? Do you know? Most Mormons know what Joseph Smith yelled.
From what I've read, it started with, "Oh Lord, my God."
Right. Is there no help for a widow's son? He
yeah,
say the second
referring
part,
to is there no help for the widow's son?
So
the Masonic cry for help.
As he's falling out of the window, he's alive, and he's yelling at the crowd for help. Okay.
Yeah.
So he wasn't dead in the bedroom. Willard Richards couldn't kill Joseph Smith because he was still alive. John Taylor couldn't kill Joseph Smith because he was still alive. What happened was a very much alive Joseph Smith fell out of the window, hit his head, hit the ground, and Levi Williams and some other people of the mob, Colonel Levi Williams, propped him up against the well, and they shot him dead. And the court case was that for the trial the next year, it was called The People versus, not John Taylor, not Willard Richards. It was The People versus Levi Williams. 5 people went to trial. There was 9 indicted. 5 went and stood trial. 4 were from Warsaw, 1 from Greenville Plains nearby. Not one of them ever said, you know what? You got the wrong guys on trial here. We didn't do it. Yeah. We would love to see our enemies, Willard Richards, John Taylor, and Brigham Young, stand in this courtroom because they told us to. They paid us to. We got there, and it was already dead.
That was a part.
We never said that.
Yeah, and that was a part of the movie that I wondered about the entire time. Was like, how did John Taylor and Willard Richards get connected with the mob, right?
They're
Like they
enemies.
didn't even touch how Willard Richards and John Taylor would have been working with the mob, which I would have loved to have seen any sort of evidence of that, to help.
Well, I mean, there's a
support their
million
theory.
and one ways that, like for example, when John DeLynn was lying about calling the cops on us because he feared for his life, he was secretly DMing us, and we have the timestamps to prove it. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's like if John DeLynn is DMing his enemies while he's simultaneously lying about telling the authorities that he's afraid of us and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a million and one ways that Willard Richards, like the communication.
No.
What do you mean? No. Okay. I'm by the way, I'm going to be devil's advocate
John
for our
DeLynn
boy
didn't go
Justin here. Okay.
John DeLynn didn't stand trial for something that you did.
Yeah, but is the U.S. judicial system in 1850 that unimpeachable? Because let me tell you, it was the U.S. judicial system that was writing letters to Martin Luther King telling him that he should off himself. I mean, the FBI was secretly tapping. Like, how many people?
It's apples and oranges. Come on.
Apples and oranges. Well, I'm just saying.
You've got people indicted that are standing trial. And it was a capital case, although it wasn't murder. That we'll talk about what the charges were and why. And
but
the
Joseph
movie doesn't
Smith
tell.
was in trial for politically motivated trials as well that were garbage. Half of the claims against him were absolute utter nonsense. So why all of a sudden do we take the U.S.
This is a capital case, and they could have easily fingered somebody else. They could said, you know what? How about this? When the mob got to the top of the stairs. And the movie doesn't really portray it right. Joseph actually thought the Nauvoo Legion was coming to get him. Opens the door, realizes it's a mob, and he hauls off and hits the first guy, and they come tumbling down the stairs. Then they get out the guns.
He iced the first one?
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
He gave him a bare knuckle sandwich?
That wasn't really in the movie, but and so they started shooting, and so it's a limited space, but so they were handing loaded guns up. There was a kind of a fireman brigade, and that's how they got 30, 45 shots off. If I'm in a room,
they couldn't reload
Joseph
that
Smith
quickly.
and Hiram, and I know the mob's shooting at him and wanting him, would I be holding the door? If I was in on it, I would open the door and say, "Come on in, guys, let's get them. Don't shoot me. They're here. You're my friends. I hired you to." They didn't do that. They put their lives on the line too.
And that's another thing that
weak proposition that those guys were in on it when they could have been shot. Well, Taylor almost died.
Yeah.
Would his inside friends, wouldn't he yell at him, say, "Hey, I paid you $500. Leave me alone. Let's open the door. Why am I holding this door shut again?"
Yeah. And that's another thing that I thought was a weakness of the movie was like expecting perfect accuracy out of John Taylor and Willard Richards. When John Taylor got shot 5 times, like that holding them to telling the exact same story when they went through such a traumatic experience and probably didn't know exactly what happened from within the jail cell, right? I think is a little bit
chaos and
crazy. Yeah.
And then, some of the accounts are 10 years old, and they were not subpoenaed. They were not depositioned. They just wrote some memories. It's not a full account. So here's where we need to really start. Look at the whole crime as in a holistic way. When Jake Hansen, I think, talked to, I actually messaged Justin. I said, let's talk about this. Let's have a debate. And he says, will you talk for more than just the 2 or 3 minutes? I said, yeah, you got to. And he says, no, I just want to focus on the 2 or 3 minutes. And I think that's wrong. You won't ever see a court case. Say a car wreck and a drunk driver. Well, let's only talk about the car wreck. No, you want to talk about 20 seconds before the car ran the red light and 2 minutes before when the guy was at the bar getting in his car. You want to talk about.
Well, isn't that okay to say that I want to focus on what I feel my expertise is, though?
He's more than welcome to. I hope he comes on. We'll talk about that. But he won't talk about before and after because that makes the case.
Okay.
I'll talk about the 2 or 3 minutes.
Keep going.
So, it's really been well documented. There's been a lot of historians. There's some great books. A guy named LeGrand Baker wrote an 800-page book, Murder of the Mormon Prophet. And basically, it's his first-hand and second-hand accounts, newspaper articles of the time of what people were saying before, during, and after. The classic, of course, we talked about this, was...
this one's crazy. Brad, dude. Check this out. Tell him, Brian.
The younger generation may not know this. A lot of people know Dallin Oaks, President Oaks. He was a law student in Chicago, okay, 50 years ago, 60, whatever it was, 55 years ago. And he had a business card, law student, University of Chicago, Dallin H. Oaks, and he went to Carthage, to the courthouse. And he says, I'd like to research this Joseph Smith trial, okay? And they gave him, from what I understand, unprecedented access to every document dealing with that court case. They didn't realize he was a member of the church. There was a lot of animosity. So he wrote this groundbreaking work called Carthage Conspiracy that had tons of information. He co-wrote it with a guy named Marvin Hill. That groundbreaking information about what led up to the trial, what led up to the murders, what happened in the trial, affidavits, all this stuff, and the conclusion. It's a phenomenal work. So President Oaks, hats off to you.
Okay, and before we continue, I got to give a shout out, guys. If you have any questions for Brian Stutzman, me, or Brad, make sure you hit us up with a super chat in the comment. Swenson Bailey already, threw us a bone. Thanks a bunch, Swenson. Making sure that, Joseph Smith killed all the werewolves. And Mr. Joshua, welcome to the Telestial Kingdom. You know what I'm saying? That's, in case you're unfamiliar, Brian, that's actually a level of membership on our channel or whatever.
Right.
And, I love it. I love it when I get these Boss Green 716. Man, that looks like an automatically generated YouTube moniker. But it says, thank you for the fantastic content. You guys helped me out of a massive faith crisis a month ago when I recommended when I got recommended your prophetic infallibility video during an anti-Mormon video rabbit hole. Keep up the great work. Awesome, my man. Awesome. Keep going down that rabbit hole, but do it prayerfully. You know what I'm saying? I always tell people, man, everybody goes astray at some point. Well, not everybody, but most people do. That's cool. It's part of the process. You get off Child's Hill and you come back with a more nuanced, informed, and strong testimony than you ever had before. I'm super excited that we got to be a part of it. And thank you to the YouTube algorithm. Thank you, Mr. AI, you know what I'm saying, for recommending our video to our buddy Boss Green 716.
And Boss Green 716, there's a really, really solid place to go to, because something that you find with a lot of anti-material online is that it will kind of just show you whatever source supports their argument, which I feel like kind of happened in this Who Killed Joseph Smith video. They left out a lot of documents that would have gone against their argument. But the Deseret News just did an article about a new website that's up called Mormoner.org that I guess is being reported as doing a really good job of showing primary records. So that may be a good place to check out as well.
Yeah.
Dude, Mormoner is actually freaking sick, dude. I love Mormoner. So
let's maybe get back to what's happening.
Yeah, keep going, bro.
So instead of looking at 2 or 3 minutes to really understand what happens, you got to understand that when the Saints started settling Nauvoo, and it's actually 1839, you had an earlier guest that was saying the priesthood was taken in 1834 because they weren't building the Nauvoo Temple in 1838. They were not in Illinois in 1838. Just a correction there from an earlier guest. So the Saints started settling in 1839. They went to Quincy first, and Joseph Smith got out of Liberty Jail and came over, and they kind of went through Warsaw, went 18 miles up the river, and bought some land there and some land across the river too, and they started settling. And at first, everybody was friendly. There was a young newspaper reporter, and he comes up over and over. His name's Thomas Sharp. And they had a dedication of the temple, and Thomas Sharp comes over, and there's a little city in Iowa called Keokuk, and that was named after a chief. And he came over, and they sat at the front table with Joseph, and they did the ground breaking and the cornerstone laying of the Nauvoo Temple, and then things went really south. And what happened was that the locals, we call them old settlers or the anti-Mormons, they were living in Warsaw and Carthage, and all of a sudden they saw hundreds and hundreds, thousands of members of the church, mostly from England, some other areas, come up the Mississippi River and settle. Well, you could vote in Illinois after being in country for 6 months, and so the political power of the church scared the locals because the Mormons normally would vote together. They had some of the same, not always, but it was called block voting. It was very common.
So the Warsaw people were chanting, "Build that wall." Is that what you're saying, Doc?
Keep them out.
Drain that swamp. Drain that swamp.
What happened was that they were outnumbered, and so they, the main political parties at the time were the Whigs and the Democrats. Okay, and so they kind of, and some other groups, but they formed in Warsaw a political party called the Anti-Mormon Political Party. Okay, now think about the implications of that.
Wait a second. So there was actually a political party, like
called,
a legit registered and lobbying and putting up candidates and ballot measures called the Anti-Mormon
Political Party.
Political Party.
Absolutely.
Well, see, now we just call them Democrats, but they just were
oh my gosh,
straight
Cardon.
up about that. You know what I'm saying? Back in the 1840s.
No.
Okay, cool.
The Anti-Mormon Political Party, their goal was to elect candidates and outvote the Mormons. We could get into some deep history. Hiram Smith ran for office. We know Joseph Smith ran for office. William Smith beat Thomas Sharp. I believe that was the correct story for a seat in the state legislature. There was a lot of animosity that was going on there. So you've got the anti-Mormon political party, but you also have economics. So in the 1840s, Nauvoo was up 18 miles up the river, and they would trade amongst themselves. And it really made the locals in Warsaw upset. In fact, I just lost something. There you go. Thomas Sharp wrote once in the newspaper that in Warsaw you could not find any goods made in Nauvoo. And then he snidely said, and we're better off because of it. He was jabbing the Mormons. So economically.
So Thomas Sharp
is a newspaper.
He's first introduced in this whole story as a member of the church.
No.
Or sorry,
no,
not
visitor,
a member of the church.
A journalist visiting the
yes,
church.
Newspaper.
I'm sorry, I'm totally messing up. But kind of like an anti-Mormon journalist, right?
He didn't start out that way, but he quickly turned negative.
Okay, so and what was the name of the newspaper?
It had
Warsaw
several
Signal.
names. We mostly know it as a Warsaw Signal.
Okay, see, now we just call it the Salt Lake Tribune, but you said it was the Warsaw Signal.
Yeah, I went through
cool.
4 or
Keep
5
going.
names and a couple owners, but for generic sake, we'll call it the Warsaw Signal. So,
And Brian,
economically, politically, and then religiously, imagine being just an immigrant, maybe a farmer. You're farming in Quincy, you're farming down in Warsaw, and you see boatload of not cars, but wagon train type, people coming up to Nauvoo. You say, hey, why did you leave England, and why are you coming to Nauvoo? Why are you passing our house? And they're like, well, there's a prophet up there named Joseph Smith, and this is your neighbor. And you're like, I met Joseph Smith down at the store. He's not like Moses. There became a lot of jealousy for the unbelievers. The believers loved living in the city of Nauvoo, but the non-Mormons saw it as a threat. Okay, but the biggest thing I think, or one of the most overlooked or underlooked problems, was that when Nauvoo became a city and they went to the state of Illinois and got a charter, the state of Illinois gave them a legal power called the power of Habeas Corpus. Now, other cities had it too, and it was really important to the church. In Missouri, they were kicked around in the court.
For people that are just tuning in, the Habeas Corpus is Latin for "show me the body."
Body
and
of evidence.
if I'm correct, the right of habeas corpus in your city charter means that you can hold your own court systems to judge your people. So you could have, instead of having to go to the county court for judging crimes, you could go to the local city court because the city charter had habeas corpus. Am I representing that correctly?
Kind of. You could bring a charge from somebody to your judge, and they could determine whether it could go forward or not, whether it was a valid claim.
Okay.
And
cool.
so
Awesome.
a lot of times the judges, there was so much garbage thrown at Joseph Smith and some of the other saints, the judge would look and say, this is bogus, and throw it away. And it frustrated the anti-Mormons.
Okay.
Because I'm sure
because
on
it's
occasion,
going to be a Joseph Smith friendly judge because it's from the city of Nauvoo that he founded.
Right.
Okay, you had a question, Brad?
Yeah. So the thing that I was going to say was, Brian, wasn't there a newspaper put out by...
That's the next thing. Yeah.
By...
William Law and Chauncey Phillips. Or
not the Nauvoo Expositor, but from Thomas Sharp. Saying like, hey, this is sounding like this is our chance. We'll make our voices known with powder and ball. like basically
Awesome.
calling to kill Joseph Smith, right?
Yeah, Chauncey Higbee. So here's what happened. About June 10th, 1844. If you can pull up that slide, I gave it to you.
Oh, yeah, we got a slide. Boom, keep talking.
So what happened was, there was some dissent in Nauvoo. William Law, Wilson Law, a couple others. And no, it's a quote.
Oh, okay, cool. The quote. This one right here?
Nope.
This one right there?
Nope.
This one right there?
Nope.
This
Must
one
be
right
the
there?
last one. Nope, one more. That's
that
the
one. Okay, cool.
So we'll get to this one. So there was some dissension, and they were actually, some people got together and formed the Reformed Mormon Church. Okay. And Thomas Sharp writes about it in his newspaper. Well, the Mormons are finally added amongst themselves. We're told that the most prominent members of the church are starting their own, essentially, I'm paraphrasing slightly. We understand that they're getting a press pretty soon. And sure enough, they published a newspaper called the Expositor. And the city council met. And actually, yeah, I guess they published their first edition on June 10th, June 11th, June 10th, 1844. And maybe it was a little bit before that. Maybe that was the date that it was destroyed. But the city council in Nauvoo met with Joseph Smith as mayor, and they dispatched a sheriff and about 100 people, and they threw the press into the street in Nauvoo, the Nauvoo Expositor, after one publication. Now, this had happened in other cities. In fact, what happened to our church in Independence, what is it, 1833? When they were getting ready to print the Book of Commandments, and those two girls, Mary Lightner,
totally.
Mary Lightner took the papers,
Book
two
of
girls
Commandments.
of the Book of Commandments, and hid in the cornfield. The mob had destroyed the Mormon press that day. So it happened. It wasn't right. And
Are you saying two wrongs make a right, dog?
No, but I heard what I am saying that
they may have had legal precedents.
They thought it was legal precedents for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One is, and I've heard scholars say, well, they probably should have just locked up the press instead of destroying it because it was private property. But we today think, well, isn't there freedom of the press, First Amendment? That wasn't federalized until later with the 14th Amendment. There was no freedom of the press at the city level or the public level. That was only at the federal level.
And freedom of speech was interpreted less of freedom to print as much as freedom to speak out without being held liable and being able to be taken to the King's Court and shoved into the Tower of London. And we're not justifying the action, obviously.
No.
But we're definitely saying that. Well, also, I think you're going to point out, Brad, that wasn't there an actual trial with habeas corpus in the city of Nauvoo where it was finally declared an actual nuisance? And then, unfortunately, the Nauvoo Legion was carrying out an actual executive order that was legally attained.
That wasn't the Legion that did that, but yeah.
That's part of it, but also they had a defense. They had a very solid legal defense going back to the Blackstone commentaries, saying why they felt like it was justified for them to do this
within their legal rights. They really did. They debated it. It wasn't a mob thing. It was done by the government. So,
which sounds totally crazy on modern day standards.
Yeah.
Like totally crazy.
Legal theories change.
But also what's crazy by modern standards, Cardon, is the fact that a religious minority was able to be driven out of their homes 3 times, right? Like, what was the federal government doing to protect anybody's rights?
Good point.
So why would they have thought, oh, you know what? The federal government really deserves to protect the freedom of speech of this thing that's trying to incite people to violence against us again, right? I think when you look at the actual context of the time, you see that there's a decent reason for some debate here. It's not as simple as, well, freedom of speech is wholly enshrined and the federal government should have been protecting it at all times, right?
So, I mean, you have American citizens.
Well said, Brad.
You had American citizens brutalizing other American citizens for practicing their American right of religion. That's exactly what you have. You have the old settlers beating up on the Mormons.
Okay, so back to the movie that you hate.
So
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, let's go here. So they destroy the press, right? And so what happens next is that one of the Chauncey Higbee runs down to Warsaw and writes this letter, and I think he gets there about June 11th, and I think Thomas Sharp publishes it the next day with the commentary that Brad was just talking about. Chauncey writes, No, it's Foster. My mistake. It was Foster, not it was the other guy. And so he wrote about what happened with his press, and then Thomas Sharp writes a commentary under, and you can show it if you want. It was that slide.
Okay.
Right from the Warsaw newspaper, he says, let's let our feeling, we don't have time for comment. Is that the one? Yeah.
Right here.
Right there. Yeah, we received this from Charles Foster. I had the wrong name.
Yeah,
so
we
Charles
received
Foster.
the above communication by the hands of Charles Foster about past 11 o'clock today. This is crazy. Like, I can't even believe that I am reading this. But look, it says, we received the above communication by the hands of Charles A. Foster. We have only to state that this is sufficient. War and extermination is inevitable. I mean, after the Missouri extermination order to say war, no, and after the Mormon War of what, 18, or maybe
Which one?
Yeah, you're right. They call two the Mormon Wars. But either way, I mean, war and extermination is inevitable. Like, dude.
Yep.
That's like unironically using the term final solution around your Jewish friends as a joke.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you shouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
will you continue to read that? It only gets better.
Yeah. Especially when he gets the caps lock out.
Yeah. Okay. So
this
it
is
says,
right from the Warsaw newspaper.
citizens arise, one and all. Can you stand by and suffer these infernal devils to rob men of their property and rights without avenging them? We have no time for, man, this printing is bad. We have no time for comment. Every man will make his own. Let it be made with powder and ball. Oh, there it was, Brad.
Yeah.
You were right, dog.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this an important part of the story of the martyrdom? This is about 2 weeks before the martyrdom. This newspaper goes out to Missouri. It goes out throughout the region. Thomas Sharp is saying, look, the Mormon leaders up in Nauvoo have stripped Charles Foster of his newspaper. Let us make our comment known with powder and ball. I think it's more as important as trying to recreate a crime scene 177 years later that has been tainted. Okay, so let's go on. So what happens the day of the jail? So that's the backdrop,
so this is
the day
proof,
of the martyrdom.
This is proof of the incitement to violence against
Right.
Joseph Smith. And you said earlier that there was also proof afterwards of people from Warsaw that confessed.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's talk about what happened the day of.
Okay.
So in the movie, they actually got it wrong. I think they quote Willard Richards' account that the mob that night came back. It was a different mob. There was definitely people around at midnight making noise around the jail the night before the martyrdom. But a group of two militia groups in Warsaw gathered, as well as one from Green Plains, 4 miles away. Levi Williams was the leader of one, and they met in Warsaw in the morning of June 27th, 1844, and they went about right in the square at the middle of the Carthage, Warsaw, Nauvoo area to a little point called Golden's Point. Okay, and they kind of take lunch there. The Governor Ford, is in Nauvoo. He breaks his promise to Joseph and leaves for Nauvoo to scold the saints without Joseph. And they're sitting there, and they said, a messenger comes from Thomas Ford, and he says, let's, why don't you guys go back to Warsaw? And some of the mob did. So we talked a little earlier about a guard in the Carthage Gray named Frank Worrell. And he understands that there's a mob, 6-8 miles away over in Golden's Point, and he sends a messenger. This is like 1 in the afternoon, give or take. And he says, now's the time to do the deed. Because they have Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith upstairs. And people have told visitors like Dan Jones and others, says, we've worked too hard to get Joseph Smith here at Carthage Jail to ever let him leave alive. So there's a big intent. So he writes a note. Levi Williams, Thomas Sharps.
That's signed, sealed, and delivered under penalty of perjury testimony.
Right.
Okay.
So they're up there talking to the crowd, Thomas Sharp and Levi Williams, and they debate, and some go back to Warsaw, some continue on to Carthage and get there about 5 p.m. So we knew that there was a debate. They said, we don't like Governor Ford. If we go and kill Joseph Smith at Carthage, the Mormons will hear about it, and they'll kill Governor Ford, and we'll be rid of 2 problems for the people of Warsaw at once. Of course, Thomas Ford was not killed by the Mormons. So they storm the jail. And again, we get there and we have to stop and think this through, okay? And by the way, like I said, there's some really, really well-documented and generally accepted scholarly books, including Dallin Oaks and LeGrand Baker. So the mob comes up the stairs, and I've asked this before. If John Taylor and Willard Richards were in on it, why did John Taylor get shot? Why didn't he open the door and say, "Oh, my friends, leave me alone," whatever? But they're holding the door and they're getting shot. It makes no sense that they're co-conspirators or that they shot.
Hold on a second. Let me push back on that. That's low-hanging fruit. We've all seen a million of the movies, like John Wick 3, which is pure truth. Okay. Even in John Wick 3, the doctor's like, okay, there's pills up on the third chair, but if you say you got them from me, I'll be killed. So you got to punch me. You got to punch me so I can say that I fought.
Taylor almost died.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I mean.
It's a miracle John Taylor got a little more than punched.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and no injuries on Willard Richards,
so maybe
right?
if he had conspired, he might have said, look, you got to let me out alive. But maybe the mob was like, we can't let this dude survive. And they just double cross him. This is basic gangster shiz. All right.
But then why wouldn't they have touched Willard Richards at all, Cardon? You're really stretching. And I appreciate someone doing the devil's advocate, but
you're not doing a good job here because, again,
I'm trying to help my boy, Justin Griffin.
Where is he?
I'm trying to help my boy.
Where is he? So, they could have hanged, but again.
Us Ninja Turtles, we keep together.
Why didn't
So here's the thing that I want to say about that situation too, Cardon, is like, what would they have been doing that performance for? They're stuck in a jail cell. It's just them. Why would they have been performing for everybody to then have...
Why didn't they do it before?
Yeah.
Why did they wait till the mob gets there? And then if the mob was there, why didn't they say, oh, you know what? We were going to kill Joseph, but you guys are here. Why don't you guys take care of it?
Like part of the plan that we got to put on a show because it's...
They hated each other. They wouldn't be talking.
Yeah, I know, but
they're shooting at each other.
Okay, how many times have enemies of enemies?
But
the English and the Germans don't like each other, but they all work together to fight Napoleon. You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on.
But they didn't blame you. They didn't stand trial and say, well, I really didn't do it. It was this other guy.
Yeah, I know. But we just
like the guys
about
who
how
were
the
shot
federal
by
system
Joseph
sucked.
Smith never they weren't like, hey, we got injured because of something John Taylor told us to do, right?
Right.
And hey, look.
Thanks, Brad, for seeing the
Joseph
logic
Smith
in
hit
here.
3 people.
Look, I'm getting owned right now, so I'm just going to go to Super Chats and take the attention off me.
Can we just kind of finish this part?
We will, but before we finish, I have to say thank you to Tyler Martin for the super sticker. Thank you, brother. And, you should be listening to this one, Stutzman, because your son just super chatted us 2 bones and said, thanks for having my dad on.
Which son?
Says... Spencer.
Spencer. My pilot son.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, rock on. Let's keep going. And then apparently I got to block somebody in the chat who's spamming. So I'll just work on blocking them.
Work at home?
Yeah, keep going.
$30 an hour? Okay. So, we kind of went over, it just makes no sense because the mob would have published in the newspaper because they did earlier. Thomas Sharp, when the Laws started their own church, the Reformed Mormon Church, they just went crazy. They published on the first page, there's dissension in the Mormon Church. Later on, William Smith was publishing things in his newspaper, and anything that was off kilter, front page of the Warsaw newspaper. Can you believe William Smith, had this contention with Brigham Young about this or whatever? This would have been front page. We went to Warsaw, or we went from Warsaw to Carthage jail to kill Joseph. We admit that we had intent, and we got there, and guess what? Within the Mormon Church was in contention, and we found dead bodies, and our hats off to Taylor and Willard Richards. That's what would have been in the newspaper. I promise you that. I've read the Warsaw newspaper. I probably know it as well as anybody contemporary, life today at least. I've read I know the tone. I go to Thomas Sharp's grave every time I'm in Carthage. I know the family. I know that his second wife was Hannah Hardy.
Now's also a really good time to talk about your
first wife.
Now's a really good time to talk about your credentials and your studies in the city of Warsaw. Yeah. Let the audience know. Brian Stutzman, basically, if I can represent you correctly, you pulled over on the side of the road one time on the way to Warsaw, Warsaw, Illinois. Interested in the history of the place because it's right near Nauvoo. And you hear much mention in many of the early journals and the Joseph Smith papers and the early pioneer journals and church history books of the city of Warsaw. But, there's just not a big presence there of church history sites that are really in the zeitgeist of church history, even though it's so close. So all these tangential references, kind of like Atlantis in the books of Plato, you know, we've heard of it, but none of us have actually been there. So one day you decide to go there, and when you pull over on the side of the road and you look and you try and see if there's a history of the place, you didn't find one. So you started just investigating it, kind of like as a personal calling and passion project, until you've basically become like, I mean, you've been invited to be mayor of the town when you've gone and done talks there. You know what I'm saying? So tell them a little bit about it.
Well, thanks for remembering. We had a little talk earlier. I was not commissioned by a university. I didn't have an endowment, financial endowment. I went there one day, and I was just fascinated by this little little river town, and I asked if they had a book, a history book, because I know
that you wrote the book.
There's thousands of Nauvoo books, or at least hundreds, and same with Carthage, and there wasn't one about Warsaw. And I was able to get some original research at Macomb at Western Illinois University up in the special collections, a lot of information that hadn't been widely published, some that had never been published. And I was able to put together this book, and I think it's a fascinating story that needed to be done. And like I said, little did I know when I started this roughly 18 years ago, that this would ever resurface. I thought it would be put on somebody's library book, shelf. And I mean, the city of Warsaw loves it because I tell a story. I not only tell about the Mormon period, I'm trying to be fair and kind to them. I tell about the founding of the city and then what happened after the Mormons left with the gold rush. I mean, we left in 46 most in the area of Hancock County, but the gold rush came in 49, and a lot of people who were in the original mob dissipated out to California and such. And so they're really curious to their history. So I wrote the book, and it was a lot of fun. And even today, if you go to Warsaw, people have told me that when they move there, outsiders, their neighbors will give them a copy of my book and say, "Here's the story of our town." And I guess they're getting it off Amazon or whatever. So it was kind of a calling to me. I had no idea that in 2022, a movie, which I feel is so full of errors, would come out. And I'd done the research for a whole different project, this book, and a lot of it applies to kind of, setting the record straight. In my opinion, this movie is way off base in so many, like I said, 7 pages, because the holistic view is not even looked at. So let's get back to what happened. We know.
Hit it.
So Joseph Smith, we talked about, fell out of the window. He's still alive. Willard Richards looked out the window but didn't shoot. He'd be shot at by the mob, by Levi Williams if he would have shot. So we know that Willard Richards didn't kill Joseph Smith because Joseph Smith was alive.
He was alive when he hit the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So who killed Joseph Smith? I can guarantee it wasn't Willard Richards or John Taylor, because they didn't do the job very well if that was their intent. So that's the answer to the movie question. Okay. So here's where it gets
Brian,
really cool. Yeah.
We're getting another thought here. I don't want to take you off track though.
Okay.
If there's someone saying they wanted your opinion on why John Taylor and Willard Richards stayed with Joseph, and I have a little bit of an idea. Like,
can you clarify that? You mean stayed in the jail, in the bedroom upstairs?
Yeah. Why did they stay there with him? Why was it just
first of all, they didn't know there was a mob coming.
Yeah.
So they were just hanging out with their friends. They're supporters. I mean, they were members of the 12, right? They're 12 apostles. If Russell M. Nelson was someplace, maybe in the hospital, don't you think Uchtdorf or somebody would come visit him?
Yeah, because they're in the quorum of the 12, so
right.
They're going to be there with the prophet. And you had other people in the jail with them, but then Joseph sent one for wine, and then they wouldn't let him back in when he came, right?
How do we bring that back?
Yeah.
Well, the word of wisdom was not practiced like it was now, and it was a hot, muggy day.
Yeah, and John Taylor, it's really funny in his recollection of leading up to the martyrdom, he mentions that they did get a hold of some wine and that they drank some, but that it was not for the purpose of the sacrament, because I guess a rumor had been going around that they were trying to do a sacrament of some kind. He's like, no. We just had low spirits, right?
Right.
And so it shows kind of how they were living the word of wisdom a little differently then.
Well, yeah, the word
a
was
little differently. Yeah. Okay.
People are shocked when saints brought coffee across the plains. The word of wisdom was not understood or lived
Yeah, and
like
there
it
were
is
three
today.
breweries in Nauvoo that paid their tithing in barrels of booze.
Yeah.
You know,
We didn't live it that way. It wasn't understood. So it's not uncommon for members of the church to, on a hot summer day, that's the way it was back in 1844. The revelations got a little stronger. The guidance from the church leaders turned it more into something that we live. So let's talk about what happened immediately after. We talked about the mob going back to where? Where did they go back to after they did the deal? They went back to Warsaw.
Yeah.
And we got a picture of the Warsaw House. See all these cities, Nauvoo had a Nauvoo house, and in Carthage they had the Hamilton House. Well, this is what the locals call the original Warsaw House.
Rock on right there.
And so this is where the mob came back after they killed Joseph Smith. About 9 o'clock, Thomas Sharp was the first one in. Now, it was owned by Ann and Sam Fleming, and Sam was back east on business, and Ann was there cooking, and their 18-year-old niece, Eliza Jane Graham, was the waitress, and she was a member of the church, but not a lot of people knew it. The Flemings were not. And can I tell the story again, even though it's another clip, or should we skip this?
Totally
Okay.
hit it. Just hit it right now.
So
this is crazy history right here, man.
So we have this 18-year-old member of the church. She's a waitress. 9 o'clock, the mob comes in. Nobody in Warsaw, anywhere, knew that this had happened. I should say anywhere nearby. People of Carthage obviously know what happened. So the first guy comes in. It's Thomas Sharp, and he asks for a glass of water. And then 2 guys came, 6 guys, 50 guys, 60 guys. And guess what? They're all bragging and talking about how they just came across Willard Richards shooting. No, just joking. Willard Richards didn't shoot. They were bragging about how they had killed Joseph Smith. Now, why in the world would they say that? The mob said they killed Joseph and Hiram Smith. They didn't say we came up to Taylor and Richards and they had done it. They stayed up from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. at the Warsaw House bragging. And how do we know this? Because Eliza Jane Graham, the 18-year-old member of the church that they didn't know was a member of the church, was a waitress, and she got her wits together, and she practically memorized who said where, what they said, and how they said it. And she was a star witness at the trial the next year, and she regurgitated exactly who said what, where they said, and how they said it.
So, Brian, how can you be sure
phenomenal.
she wasn't a plant by John Taylor and Willard Richards?
Oh, my.
Yeah, how do you know that she wasn't a polygamous co-conspirator or Confederate?
Lizard or what other?
Freaking Brigham Young and John Taylor. For real.
Well, first of all, Brigham Young didn't know anything was going on because he was in Boston.
But I do want to point out the way that we're using these questions right now is exactly the way that the documentary is lined up. It's like, here are these possibilities, and if you can't prove them wrong, then this has to be an option.
Oh, so you
what's
Ed
plausible?
Too, Brad?
If you can prove
You're not a
this
fan
negative,
of the movie either?
if you can't prove this negative, Cardon.
Come on, Brutus. Okay. Yeah, you know what? She could have had a walkie-talkie and a CB radio too, but it's probably not likely because they weren't invented, right? So radioing to Brigham Young about what happened. Yeah. So she quickly went to Nauvoo and lived with her parents, and then the trial comes, okay? So we know what happened before. We know the lead up. We know that there was intent. We knew that there was tensions. We know what happened that day. We know who said what, that they killed Joseph. And we know that they came back and bragged about it, okay? So the trial, the governor of Ford promised a trial the next year, right? And so the movie doesn't really correctly, in my opinion, state what happens. It was court week. There was multiple court actions happening. The county commissioners were elected by Mormons, and they had Mormons on the jury, okay, for the different court cases. So the court case of what I said was the People versus John Taylor. No, the People versus Levi Williams was the murder case. It wasn't John Taylor or Willard Richards or Brigham Young.
Okay.
So the court case comes up, and there was mob. It was mob. There was open arms and guns inside and outside the courthouse. It was very intimidating. Brigham Young and the 12 told the saints in Nauvoo, say, you know what? Joseph and Hiram were not safe in Carthage. We recommend that you don't go. And it wasn't for nefarious reasons. Don't narc us out. It's like, you might get killed if you go. Well, 2 weeks before the trial, the prosecutor, Josiah Lamburn was his name, rather, he got Eliza Graham to come, and they kind of snuck her in. And they start the trial, and there were some Mormons, I guess, there were some Mormons on the jury, and the defense, Calvin Warren, originally from Warsaw, owned one of the first hotels in Warsaw, by the way. He was a defense attorney, and they go up to the judge, Young, who later, this is really interesting, died in an insane asylum in Washington, D.C. That's a different story. But they went up to the judge and they said, you know what, we have a tainted jury here. We need to get a new jury. And then they said, well, we can't do that. It's unprecedented. And the defense says, you know what, we've never had a trial like this in the United States. We have a famous, religious leader murdered, and we have 5 people on trial. We need to get a new jury. And so they dismissed the jury, all of them, and then they went out in the crowd and randomly picked people who were anti-Mormons, and they sit on the trial, as the jurors on the trial. So you've got this situation here where the testimony's given, and not once did anybody on either side say, these 5 guys, Mark Aldridge, Thomas Sharp, Levi Williams, Grover, Jacob Davis. Nobody ever once said, we kind of got the wrong guys here. They didn't stand up and say, you know what? We're on trial here, but it's really somebody else that put us up to. We know we can maybe get hung even. Eliza Graham, they didn't finger anybody. They didn't say it was these other guys. They stood trial. Now the charge wasn't murder, believe it or not. The charge was conspiracy to commit murder. Now the movie would have you believe
conspiracy to commit murder. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason was, go on.
Go ahead.
So I found it really kind of disappointing that the movie talked about this in a way that they were saying, hey, look, John Taylor told people not to go to these courts to make their case. And I'm like, the guy got shot 5 times and watched his prophet be killed in front of his eyes as he fell out the window and then got killed there. Why on earth would they go to this anti-Mormon court? Of course he would be telling people to stay away from that. They had zero faith that it was going to be a fair trial.
You get the award for being the smartest guy in the room, because that's exactly
He's
right.
He's Canadian.
Oh, the smartest Canadian in the room. Exactly.
That's why I know American history.
Why? Hey,
I had to immigrate, guys.
The courthouse wasn't that far from the jail where he was shot earlier, the year earlier. You're exactly right. Okay, so the reason the movie also says, and I think it's completely in error, they suggest that we may not know if these 5 were at Carthage. Well, we know absolutely they were. There was witnesses. Thomas Sharp said he was. Levi Williams told his troops to pull the trigger, and that's undisputed. These guys were there, and they bragged that night that they were there. But the reason it wasn't murder charges, that Lamburn said that it was too high of a legal standard, because nobody would, after the fact, even though they confessed the night of, and they confessed in the newspaper also that they had been involved. We can show that clip, by the way, if you want to. This is out of the Warsaw newspaper. The day after they had announced the death of Joseph and admitted that he had said, "Oh Lord, my God," before it was, quote, dispatched. But July 10th, Thomas Sharp writes about murdering Joseph in the community and says,
Is this one right here?
Yeah, can you read that?
It says, obliged to commit during the violation on law. So we claim the community in which we live is a law-abiding community, and that it will go as far to maintain the supremacy of the law as any other in the nation. Our citizens have regretted and still regret the necessity. Oh, it was necessary. Mm-hmm. The necessity that existed for taking the law in this particular instance. Oh, so it was an exception to the rule. Yeah. Into their own hands, but that it would sooner or later have to be done. No one acquainted with the facts of this case could deny. Right. It was inevitable, and the only question was as to the proper time. In relation to this, we will remark that Joe and Hiram Smith, spelled incorrectly, were regarded as the only individuals that could hold together the Mormon community. They were the instigators and authors. This is like classic victim blaming. They were the instigators and authors of all our troubles. And to think that progressives like these people. So they were the instigators and authors of all our troubles. The only alternative then was whether the guilty cause should be removed and in the natural course of things, suffer the evil to eradicate itself. There's that extermination/eradication word again. Or whether we should have waited until renewed aggression. So it was a preemptive strike.
Yeah. Did Taylor, Richards, or Young ever have anything like that in their paper that they said they did it? No, but the people who stood trial. This is July 10th, 1844, front page, or the Warsaw Signal newspaper right there.
Well, and also, why would anybody take upon them the mantle of such a heinous crime?
Right, and admit, right?
Because they were paid off. Obviously, Cardon. They really wanted the new leaders of the Mormon Church to get off scot-free, right?
That's really what they wanted. Polygamy. You know what I'm saying?
Obviously.
It shares some of that polygamy.
You can see why I had several pages of notes.
I'm the devil's advocate.
Hey, and Cardon, also, just talking about these
racist.
general newspapers, there were newspapers out there bragging that they had also killed John Taylor, another of the Mormon apostles, right?
Really?
Yeah. So, like, there were people who, like, there's, like, a random one out there that's like, and it seems like we got one of the extra ones, too, right? Like, these were not people who were on the same side as John Taylor or Willard Richards.
So, yeah, that's July 10th, 1844, Warsaw Signal. They admitted they did it. Why wasn't that in the movie? That newspaper clip. It's public. I can send
also, in defense of Justin Griffin, he was saying, I'm focusing on these 3 minutes, and he was hyper-focused.
I understand that. He was hyper, and I grant him that.
So he's hyper-focused on trying to follow what he perceives as the physical evidence of the Carthage theory.
Right.
But you bring up a really, really good point that, hey, there's no way with modern evidence that we can ever actually recreate that because they've redone the door, they've redone the steps, they've redone the landing. None of the trees they could have shot from are there.
And Cardon, on top of all of that, it was smooth bore muskets with round balls.
How do you know that?
You cannot recreate those. You couldn't recreate this right now, even if you knew exactly where people were standing.
Okay.
Because the bullets wouldn't fly the right direction.
They go different. Okay. I'm saying you can't look at 3 minutes and get the whole story. That's my message.
Actually, we could. It would just require multiple shots and then taking the statistical median after multiple shots. You know what I'm saying?
How
and then
many,
figuring out under the bell curve what the highest probability arc would be, which would mean we would have a really fun excuse under scientific reasoning to just line up a bunch of black powder guns and shoot multiple times at the windows of the Carthage prison. And then when the church comes complaining, we say, #science, #science.
So what do you need? 10,000 shots, 50,000 shots.
You know what I'm saying?
And then you got your
we could
outliners.
do major property damage that may or may not be against municipal code in Carthage.
You know, realistically, my point is that if you just take 3 minutes of forensic evidence, there's no way in the world when you balance it against the historic evidence, the testimonies of people involved, the motives. In a criminal case, they always look at motives, right?
Oh, yeah.
Insurance fraud, if they got a motive, somebody kills their spouse, if they got an insurance policy, that's one of the first things they look at motive. It all comes together.
Brian,
you can nitpick three minutes that we don't have a lot of information on. You can speculate. You're not going to get the whole story, especially when they come out in the newspaper and say they did it. Yeah. And then they go to trial and they said they never fingered anybody else. They didn't take the stand, but they didn't say anything.
We choose a different word for that.
Did it?
You know,
why didn't they say, hey, you got the wrong dudes up here, okay? Now, let's go to this last story. So this last clip from John Hay.
Before we go to the last story, guys, if you got questions for Brian Stutzman, those of you who are just tuning in, we keep getting more and more viewers on the live stream. So if you guys are just tuning in, just so you know, we've got Brian Stutzman here, who literally wrote the book. Here is the book on Warsaw, Illinois, including the Mormon period, which is now in its 2nd edition. Warsaw, Illinois is the city where the mob came from. The mob that fought in the Nauvoo War, the mob that killed Joseph Smith, the mob that burnt the buildings down of all of the members during the Nauvoo period, so on and so forth. And he wrote the compendium on the history of this town, and he takes great issue with the movie Who Killed Joseph Smith by Justin Griffin, who came on our program earlier this month. So we're just going over some of what he thinks are the physical evidences that debunk this claim.
So I'm sure Justin's a nice guy.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry. Give us your super chats if you got questions for Brian.
We're not looking.
And to be fair, Brian,
yeah,
I've heard that they're working on another movie, and that the next movie that they're working on should go over the motive and everything.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the motives then, okay?
Yeah.
Besides what we're here, I'm sure he's a nice guy. We're not looking for a legal fight or a lawsuit. I'm not trying to defame him, but I am trying to show that I have a strong opinion differently based upon the evidence I found, and I've got quotes here. Okay.
Ooh,
so
he could jump on right now. I just got a text.
Oh, gosh.
Saying he could jump on. Brad, do you want to have Justin jump on in?
Yeah.
By all means.
All right. Okay. Hopefully his sound is good.
Yeah, there he is.
Yo, Justin!
Hey, we finally get to meet.
He's here.
Justin.
How's the farm, dog? Oh, it says he's connecting to audio. Okay, it says he's connecting to audio.
What's up, guys?
I be.
Hey.
All right, dog. So first off, how's the farm, man? How's the farm, dude?
Hey, thanks for asking.
Okay.
The chickens appreciate your concern.
Hey, you're lucky you still got them right now. I hear they're like getting rid of chickens nationwide with some kind of conspiratorial fake avian flu.
I've seen that. We're watching for any suspicious people that drive around our farm for sure.
All right. Hey, will they be met with powder and ball? No, I'm just kidding. We can't say that on YouTube.
Brad, you're like crazy spicy on this episode. I'm like, I see how it is. You're holding back when we talk.
Hey, no, I wanted to hear your side when we were first talking. I wanted to do my best not to.
Hey, so have you been listening,
everything.
dog? Have you been listening?
Yeah, I didn't know. You didn't give me the time. I didn't know, man. Otherwise, I could have logged in earlier. So I listened to the last 10 or 15 minutes. I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right.
So hit us up, dude. What? It's getting real. Welcome to the jungle.
Why can't I see Brian?
Oh, here.
Is he in studio? Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey, I'm glad we finally get to talk. I've asked the ability, for the opportunity to talk to you. I know that I think it was even just recently, yesterday, Jacob Hansen asked if he could moderate a debate, and you weren't able to. At least that's what he said. So I'm glad we finally get to talk. You have a phenomenally
and by the
dramatic
way, what do you
movie.
mean, Justin? What time? I looked up my text message right now, and I literally said, we're starting in 5 minutes.
Bro.
Oh, that's easy to miss, though, Cardon. That's easy to
You
miss.
told me that. I asked you at 6:10, and you didn't tell me that till 2 hours later.
Yeah, sorry, my phone died. I have this big, fat, crappy battery, and I didn't realize it was dead until I tried to look at the live stream on my phone. And I was like, oh, shoot! So anyway, keep going.
Tells you like 5 minutes ago. He's like,
if you've been listening, your production quality is good. There's a couple little glitches, but you did the music, the language. It was full of a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of errors, and I think the biggest problem that I have, if you've been listening, for instance, at the 4 minute or 8:44 mark, you said the 5 were not likely to be at the martyrdom that stood trial. Heck yeah, they were. Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp for absolutely, positively sure. But I think the bigger question is, hold on, just let me finish. The bigger point is, I know you're looking at the 3 minute window. You cannot draw an adequate conclusion in a crime scene that's 177 years old, that hasn't been preserved. The windowsill isn't the original. The door was replaced. That panel's original, but the door's wrong. The stairs are wrong. That's not the original stairs. You've got to look at the fact that the mob talked about killing Joseph Smith before. They talked about it that day. They bragged about it that night. And on July 10th in the newspaper in Warsaw, they said they did it. They stood trial for it, and they never once said somebody else was in on it. Why are we standing trial? Let them stand trial, and we'll get rid of them too. You got to look at the whole picture. You got to look at what was said, not just 3 minutes of guessing which way a round, what you call it, a round something musket ball went. I think you've missed the whole point of how we concluded what happened. It's a huge picture, and you've got one little 3-minute piece here.
Okay, so I'm going to tone that down just a second for my boy Justin.
All right.
Because he is coming on, and nobody ever has the guts to do that. Okay, so
Yeah,
so
I really
before we
appreciate
lambast this poor
I'm
guy,
trying to be polite. I'm trying to be polite, okay, Justin? I'm trying to be
I get
polite.
you're passionate, but I literally just got thrown to the wolves with some crazy ex-Scientologist in another channel where I was just like showing up. So I don't want to do the exact same thing to poor Justin here,
Okay,
all right?
agreed.
Let's be fair.
So passions run high because our boy here, Brian, is a huge Nauvoo era historian on the city of Warsaw, where the mob originated from.
Right.
Okay. So his spider senses starts tingling really hard when you made some of your claims in your movie, specifically the ability to analyze physical evidence, especially the fact that the death mask was manipulated by people that wanted to kind of cover up some of the wounds, supposedly.
Do you know that?
What?
You know they put cotton in Hiram Smith's face, even a rag, before they made the death mask? You knew that.
In the hole in his nose so that they
Yeah.
could make the death mask. That's right. 'Cause
Right.
There's a big hole.
So how
there.
can you even see where the ball went?
So I didn't say where the ball went.
Okay.
The Lyons brothers did. The Lyons brothers measured it, and from that wound, and he was a doctor, he's the one that came up with that hole being
Yeah.
0.69 inches.
Yeah, and there's different opinions because it's not what the crime scene wasn't preserved for 177 years.
It wasn't? Oh.
It was owned by somebody else.
Wow.
And so you can't go back there. It's not reliable. It would be
I
thrown out of a
can't.
court of law today.
Well,
Okay.
why have so many people done it then?
No,
Then what?
I agree. Well, let's split the difference here.
Okay.
I agree with both you guys simultaneously. The crime scene has been manipulated enough, in my mind, Justin, at least, that I don't think you can really make some good claims because there's just too much of the chaos theory involved. After 177 years, way too many things could have happened really without us knowing. I'm an escrow inspector for homes. I'm licensed in the state of California. I have found entire rooms that have been sealed off by 3 generations of homeowners that didn't know it because somebody wanted to put a false wall up to hang a painting of their grandmother. You know, I found entire compartments of houses.
I don't care. My theory relies nothing on the building.
Well, we do take into account evidence from the door. And
I don't. My theory is the only one that does not need the door. The other guys, they all need the door and they need that angle. And I'm like, I don't even trust the door. I don't even know if that was shot by the mob. And if it was, it could have been altered. And I've heard that panel could be upside down. They need the door. They need the angle in that bullet hole to explain their theory. I don't.
Okay, then Justin, do me this favor, because we just got you here. And fortunately, we got you when the biggest amount of our audience is tuned in right now, too. So, you know, you're a surfer, bro. You're riding the wave of views. What is the strongest part of your theory right now? And then
so the strongest part of my theory is well, let me ask you, Brian.
Yeah.
Do you fully agree with the 2 eyewitness accounts from John Taylor and Willard?
See, here's your problem. Here's the problem. There were dozens of eyewitness accounts.
No, just answer his question. Answer his question.
Just answer
They
my
didn't.
question.
They weren't subpoenaed. They weren't depositioned. Yeah, one was 10 years,
we have
and they were
two-
talking.
we have
No,
two
they're
eyewitnesses
they're
that
traumatic
Wait, no
witnesses.
talking over each other. It's bad radio.
Yeah,
I'm going to mute you, Brian. First off,
he asked me a question.
well, I know, but answer his question. Do you believe the 2 eyewitness accounts?
They were
from John
under
Taylor and
stress.
Willard.
They were what's that?
So they both gave eyewitness accounts. Do we agree on that?
They gave accounts. They were traumatized.
Whoa. We agree they gave accounts, right?
Well, yeah, just answer his question. You don't have to jump in.
The accounts aren't reliable, but yes, they gave accounts.
Okay, you don't believe the accounts are reliable. Is that what you just said?
Oh yeah, they were under stress, and it's a
Okay, no, I know you have your reasons for why you believe they weren't reliable. But
I also think it's important for us to point out that John Taylor's came a lot later as well, right?
So Brad, let me ask you, do you agree with the eyewitness accounts?
Is he asking?
Do I agree with the eyewitness accounts?
Brad, yes. Do you think they're accurate?
I think they're as accurate as can be expected.
That's a better way to say it.
Based on 0 to 100, how accurate would you say they are?
0 to 100. Let me think. I'd probably say they're 70-ish% accurate.
Okay, Cardon, where are you at?
Maybe
Do
80,
you
depending on
believe
how
the
you weight
eyewitness
things.
accounts from those 2.
You mean from John Taylor and Willard Richards?
Yeah, how accurate do you think they are?
I'm more familiar with John Taylor's account, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is 25 years after the fact, right?
10 years.
10
well,
years, yeah.
he gave two. He gave one at a conference 10 years after, and then he did his full memory, wrote it out 2 years after that.
Okay.
And that's the one the church usually uses, but they also refer. Willard gave two. He gave one that night in his journal, and then he wrote one up that was in the Times and Seasons about 30 days later.
Okay, cool. So I have zero fear of just answering what I'm thinking. And the first thing that came to my mind is I'm thinking, well, if you want to trust John Taylor's visions and his prophetic, calling as a prophet and his testimonies thereof, you got to trust all the other ones too. So I would say that I probably trust his account as an honest person that's recalling it as best he can, as much as I would trust any of his other accounts in any of his other journals.
Okay, so let me give you, there's at least 100 inconsistencies between their accounts. For example, not a meaningful detail, but Willard says everyone's coats were off but mine. John Taylor says all four of our coats were off. So one of those, they can't both be right. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That is a meaningless
point.
detail. That is a
Justin.
meaningless detail. I'm not saying that's important, but I'm saying... But
And-
I am saying out of 100 inconsistencies, there's 5 or 10 of them that are well beyond emotion of the moment, misremembered.
Now, Justin, I have a question for you as well, actually, in this vein. I think it'd be really interesting to do. I don't know if there's a way for us to recreate this. When did you guys shoot the film?
Last summer was the main reenactments.
Okay, so with last summer being the main reenactments, and we're only like a year away. I would be really interested to grab 2 random people from the crew and see how they described everything happening. Right?
Sure. No.
Because I don't think that their accounts
we're
would
not
match up that
disagreeing.
well.
We're not disagreeing. What we're saying is there are inaccuracies.
Of course,
So-
but there's going to be
Then we go
inaccuracies
through
in
and
any-
measure all of those inaccuracies.
No, you get more
Is
information. You
it
touch other people
possible
that
that
were there.
he forgot that one guy was wearing their coat? Yeah. Case closed. That's not a detail I care about anymore. It's too easily explained by anybody could have misremembered that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Do you follow me? So I go through all the 100. Well, another one. One says the window open. One said the window was closed. It's like, all right, that one's a little bit harder because a lot of action happened through that window. If Hiram got shot through the back, did it go through the glass of the window? But still, in the end, you're like, they didn't talk about the glass breaking, so maybe that one doesn't matter. So a bunch of the inconsistencies you can get away from like that just by saying anyone would have misremembered that detail. It's easy to explain, but like I said, there's 5 or 10 of them that are way too difficult. You can't just misremember these. They're way too different from each other.
I do have questions.
And then there's inconsistencies with the actual evidence, the physical evidence. Well, we have the skull. We can see the damage to the skull. Does that skull look like it was shot twice by a musket? That's one of the questions that you have to ask, and you try to recreate and see, can we pull that off with a musket or not? Or was it maybe a pistol? Or did someone have a pistol or a rifle? You can run all of those tests once you've seen that evidence. Now, a big one is this. Brad, do you think John Taylor's watch was shot?
No, but I am not bothered by him thinking it was.
Okay, Cardon, do you think his watch was shot?
Oh, dude, I am not the guy to ask.
Why not?
I'm not as
pictures of it.
I'm not as familiar as these cats. Yeah, it seems like it was because I've seen the physical evidence.
Okay, Brian, do you think?
No, we know it wasn't. They thought
that John's watch was
a lot of
shot?
people thought he even thought his family thought his great grandsons in my ward they thought
Brian,
it was, but
do
you got
think that John Taylor's
no,
watch
we know
was
it
shot?
wasn't.
Okay.
But people thought.
This
I mean,
is a narrative that was told for a long time.
people thought John Taylor
and
thought
then
it.
people-
Yeah.
Whoa, hold on, bro. So this was a narrative that was told for a long time.
By John.
And then people looked at the evidence and said, this probably didn't happen. because when you look at that watch, it looks like it didn't happen. So they went out and ran tests, shot 16 different watches from every angle, from every caliber, from ricocheting, and they concluded this watch wasn't shot. That's what I've done. Is I'm like, okay, the narrative was that the watch was shot, but the evidence doesn't look like it was. So let's start testing it to see if that's the case or not. So was John Taylor's watch being shot important to my theory? No, it wasn't. But it shows my methodology, if that makes sense. Now
okay, but your methodology is very limited.
You compare them against the evidence and you say, okay, what is the evidence saying happened? And if it's slightly different than what the eyewitnesses said, no big deal. But if it's majorly different, then you have to start saying, wow.
Okay, so hold on. We gotta let Brad in here.
Okay.
Not Brad, sorry. We gotta let Brian in here really fast. What's your response to all that, Brian?
Oh my heck.
Oh my heck, that's your response?
If you're only looking at two witnesses, two people that are there and they're testimony, how about of the dozens? How about what they wrote in the newspaper the next week or 2 weeks later? What happened?
Two people that were eyewitnesses in the room in those 2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, I thought the mob entered the room.
The mob. Okay, go show me the eyewitness account from anybody that was in the room that saw in the room in those 2 to 3 minutes.
I'd refer you to the 800 book page called "Murder of the Mormon," 800 page book called "Murder of the Mormon Prophet" by LeGrand Baker.
Well, and also here, let me jump in on this.
Show me the eyewitness. I would love
It's
that.
too big. I have it at home. I had a picture. I brought you a picture.
Hold on.
Of the book. You got a slide. So.
I get it. Actually, unfortunately on Zoom he can't see our slides live.
Okay.
But if he's watching the live stream, he can see that.
So I mean,
throw that on the screen.
There's evidence.
Well, hold on. Just let me say this.
Yeah.
Justin, there's overwhelming evidence from everybody that bragged about the murders in Warsaw, Illinois, and the surrounding areas, saying we did it, with an absolute dearth of any kind of braggadocio, which we know was superfluous in the Wild West. So shouldn't we believe them and take them? Isn't it good history to take the people?
No, I believe the mob killed Joseph. I believe that.
Okay.
Joseph fell out of the window dead. Not dead. He was alive when he came out of the window.
Okay, we agree. So we agree John Taylor didn't shoot him because he was already alive, or kill him. We know that Willard Richards didn't kill him, right?
Great. We agree that John Taylor and Willard Richards did not kill Joseph. His fatal shot was outside of the jail. That's right.
Okay. So who killed Joseph Smith?
So
who was it?
Does that tell the whole story?
Levi Williams. He stood trial for it.
Shot by the mob. Does that tell the whole story? What happened in the 2 to 3 minutes is very different than what happened outside.
Why didn't the mob say that they got there and there was a political struggle? Why did Taylor and Richards wait till the mob was there to even do anything? And why did they put their lives on the line? Bullets coming in. Why didn't they open the door and say, "Hey, mob, we're on your side. We want these guys dead. Don't shoot at us." It didn't happen that way.
I have explanations for all of that, but they're just theories. That was not the point of the movie, to come up with that. The point of the movie was to analyze the physical evidence.
Okay.
When you look at it as a forensic detective, they do not care about motive, because motive cannot be proven scientifically. They care about the evidence. That part
in a court of law they do, though.
Meant to be an analysis of the evidence and comparing that to the eyewitness accounts. For example, the watch, and say, you know what, this didn't happen. And it's not just me. It's all these other guys that are super strong members of the church. Totally agree with you guys that John Taylor and Willard Richards had nothing to do with it. But they also came up with theories because they knew the evidence was not matching the eyewitness accounts, and they wanted to explain why.
I'm not buying it.
Justin, I do got to ask this question. So we know Joseph Smith wasn't killed in the room. He runs to the window, says the Masonic plea for help, falls out the window. Then he's dragged to the well, propped up on the well, and the local leader of the militia, what was his name,
Levi
Brian?
Williams.
Levi Williams commands 5 of his militia people / mob members to form a firing squad. They end up propping his body up against the well, and then they shoot him. And so really his death is by Levi Williams and those 5 people, as evidenced by... hold on, let me finish.
He shot in the jail, Cardon.
No, I get that. I'm coming full circle here for you.
Okay.
So the fact that Joseph Smith was killed by those 5 mob members / militia members under the leadership of this Levitt guy, Levi guy, sorry,
Right.
was proven by the fact that the court case against the mob wasn't called the mob versus the people. It was the people versus Levi Williams, or what's his name again?
Levi Williams.
Levi Williams. Okay. So then wouldn't that kind of call into question even the naming of your film, Who Killed Joseph Smith?
We know.
Because we know it was the mob outside, I guess, that finally killed him. Shouldn't it be more like, who could have possibly betrayed before he was killed, Joseph Smith?
No, but Who Killed Joseph Smith is better clickbait. I'll give you that.
Okay.
Let me answer that.
Yeah.
Amalickiah in the Book of Mormon.
He wasn't
Who
there.
killed the leader of the Lamanites, the king of the Lamanites? Was it
One of his
Amalickiah?
five
The crime
it
scene's
was
probably
one of
as
his servants.
preserved. Oh, let me say this: the crime scene for that crime was probably as well preserved as Carthage jail
Hey
is.
Brian, thanks, buddy. I mean, we've talked many times, and this is why it's difficult to talk with you, is because you say
can't
stuff
hear
like that.
Okay,
And if you
hold
wanna
on.
keep
We
going,
got a
that's
monitor
fine,
speaker.
but we're
I
not going to
can't
get
hear.
anywhere.
What's he saying?
So just answer his question. What was your question again, Justin?
Did Amalickiah kill the king of the Lamanites?
Yes. So did Malachi kill the king of Lamanites?
Or was his servants the one that stuck the knife in him? Who killed the king of the Lamanites?
Yeah, so now you're bringing the question like, did I make the movie as the director, or did I have a bunch of cinematographers and people doing it for me and I got credit? That's what you're saying, right?
Right. So who really killed him? Was he shot inside of the jail? Which shots are the ones that actually ended his life? Why did he jump out of the window and then get killed shot by the mob outside of the window? The 2 to 3 minutes is the story, not outside of the jail. It's what happened in the 2 to 3 minutes that everyone is trying to figure out. And so I'm like, Brian, dude, we've talked many times. He will not talk about the 2 to 3 minutes. I'm like, what do you think happened 2 to 3 minutes? No, mob killed him. I'm like, fine. That's a great story. Go tell it. I support you. I love it. I love all your history, everything before, after. Brian's the one that taught me about Eliza Graham. I love her story. I love all that.
Great one.
It's just not applicable to what I was doing. And he refuses to address the 2 to 3 minutes. He refuses to address that evidence. And
He
all of
spoke
us
about
that
it.
are in the movie. That's why Brian asked me to be in the movie. And I'm like, this isn't a movie about what you want, Brian. This is a movie about 2 to 3 minutes. Everyone in that movie has a theory about the 2 to 3 minutes. Brian does not. That's why I'm like, dude.
Okay, so what's your biggest question in the 2 to 3 minutes that you think holds the most water? Actually, I'll ask Brian this one because I asked you the last question, Justin.
Okay.
Brian, what is the in those 2 to 3 minutes? Because I get what he's saying when he's saying who killed Joseph Smith. He's saying, well, you know, there's a lot of people culpable here, and you know, you could kind of just pick who's the leader per se, or who gets credit in many different ways. So you could title the movie in many different ways. Awesome, I get that.
What's your question?
What is the biggest flaw of evidence that you feel you saw in the 2 to 3 minutes of the actual scene documented in the movie?
And I don't know what film he was talking about that we were going to do together, but there's a couple. First of all, the 3 minutes. We'll keep it right to Justin, in fairness, okay? The 2 to 3 minutes in the jail.
Okay, cool.
We know certain things that did happen. We'll never know other things that happened because the crime scene is 177 years old. You go to a crime scene 2 years ago, and it will be thrown out. O.J. Simpson, I mean, you're old enough to remember Jared Furman. What was he doing? They filmed him picking up evidence in a bag without using a glove, and they threw the whole thing out.
What evidence does Justin show in his movie?
A lot of speculation using. I don't agree with the lion.
Which one?
Okay, using the 2 eyewitness accounts as were they depositioned? Heck no. One was just retelling. You go to somebody who's been in a traumatic event and you say, hey, tell me about this.
Yes, eyewitness accounts are very...
So he's pitting 2. He's not taking into account what the mob said that was there. That's one of the big issues. But it's a bigger story. When they claim that they did it, you pick apart something that we have inconclusive evidence from a tainted crime scene 177 years ago. You're not going to get a fair-minded jury or a judge to even consider it being reliable.
Yeah, okay, I get that. But that's also...
It's not reliable.
So that's a year or 2 later. I guess what I want to know is Justin Griffin's movie indicts John Taylor and Willard Richards as those that conspired with the mob, and there's
zero evidence that ever happened. before, during, or after. And the mob, as we said in the newspaper, they would have said our guys
holistically, but I'm just saying,
can I jump in for a second?
It's like saying, okay, the equivalent of this, President Lincoln shot at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. No, it was really Mary Todd Lincoln that did it. Really? Well, the bullet that went into Abraham Lincoln's head could have been this way or that way. No. You got to look at the whole thing, and here you have to look at the whole thing.
Yes, I get.
But the problem is, it's a tainted crime scene. Two unreliable testimonies that were not depositions by any means, and we're trying to base the whole 3 minutes on those two testimonies in a crime scene.
And I want to make a quick contrast.
Let me ask this one question. Can I ask my question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Justin, you brought up John Taylor's watch and how we were able to double check and see what happened there. I feel like John Taylor's watch is a much, much more solid piece of evidence for us to be able to go back and test than anything else discussed in the movie. Like, with the amount of Hiram Smith's skull that was missing, with the way that the clothing had dissolved, I think it's a far less reliable bit of evidence than the watch, right? And so with the crime scene being reconstructed and everything, where we know John Taylor's was literally, it was when he hit the window, right? When he went for the window. So it's I think it's a much more narrow thing for people to have looked at. And he kept the watch and had it with him. Right. So it wasn't something where we had to worry about it getting buried somewhere, dug up later, pieces of it missing, right? It was kept about in the same condition that it was when he got hit. Mostly to show people, here's the time that it was, right?
This is the kind of discussion I like.
Okay.
Because you bring up good points. Does that make sense? I love the back and forth on, okay, here's how I read the evidence. And you're like, no, I read it like this. And that's what I feel. I hate debating this to come up with some winner. What I like is discussions that lead us closer to the truth.
Hit it.
And I'm willing to capitulate on stuff where I'm like, you're right. I just want to know what the truth is. So I want to discuss the evidence. I'm like, dude, if I want to talk about motive, then I'm going to go talk with Brian and his team. Or if I want to talk about what did the mob say afterward, that's exactly who I'll go talk with. But if I want to talk about the 2 to 3 minutes in the evidence, he's not the guy. That's just not his expertise.
Oh, okay, well, hold on.
I don't have a problem with what he's studied, if that makes sense. I'm not refuting any of his stuff. But I'm like, dude, let's talk about the theory, and that he never wants to do.
So Justin, it sounds like the book that he's referring to, the 800-page book with additional eyewitness accounts, does include stuff that's pertinent to this discussion.
So that I'm like, yeah, bring me that. I don't have any eyewitness accounts of what happened in those 2 to 3 minutes of anyone other than Willard and John Taylor.
Okay, so hold on.
Of course I would want to see that.
So we can work with that. Hold on a second. So, Brian.
Yeah.
What other eyewitness accounts exist of people in the jail during that 2 to 3 minutes?
Well, we have to look at, I think even in Justin's movie, people on the stairs. Do they count?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They have to because they were.
So
in
Gallagher,
Gallagher.
Do you know Justin? Why don't you tell us about Gallagher?
Isn't he one of the three that got shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. One of them actually got shot.
Yeah, two
Joseph 2 to 3.
The movie says
someone else said. I'm like, dude, Joseph Smith, he shot. 3 guys got injured.
Yeah, 2 guys.
And they're like, that's not on the account. I'm like, okay, well, these guys, and isn't he the one that like sued the city because he wanted a new apparel because it had put a hole in his clothing? Well, what the heck? You guys want me to do this? I did it. I lost my shirt. Give me a new shirt. They did it.
He got
they bought him a new shirt.
He got a new suit. You've been to Green Plains, haven't you? By Warsaw?
No.
Okay. That's my test. Okay. So he was from Green Plains, and the citizens did buy him a suit for his role in trying to kill Joseph Smith. And there was actually 2 people killed, and one came back to Warsaw and sat there at the Warsaw House and sat by the fireplace while Eliza Jane Graham was serving the crowd. I want to make one question. At 3 minutes and 30 seconds into your movie, you said that Joseph fell to his death. That's in your movie at 3 minutes and 30-second part. But tonight you said that he did not fall to his death, that a firing squad shot him. Which one? Which account of yours do we take if we're going to?
Good catch, Brian. Yeah, I think he got propped up against the well and shot by the mob.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we're just speaking symbolically that he fell to his death because we're just trying to get.
But I do think Brian is bringing up an important point here, that even with the documentary that Justin made, in the documentary he says one thing, in an interview later he says something different. So his own testimony doesn't line up with itself, which is kind of the argument made about John Taylor. And
you know what? I'm not trying to bust your chops.
That's exactly why you should analyze it and ask questions, get feedback. That's exactly right. Whenever you see inconsistency.
Can I ask him some more questions?
Sure, but then I got one too. Okay. So 2 more questions, and then I got one.
You know, I'm not. Brad,
by the way, can we get a really bright light, Justin?
You're dark. You're a little dark.
Can we get a really bright light?
Take out the hat
and have you like at a table, and then like have the room be dark as we like.
Interrogation.
As we interrogate you, you know what I'm saying?
You know, Brad picked up on this. Justin, I want to be as friendly and kind as possible. Okay, let's be real here. But Brad, I'm trying to illustrate a point that you're going to have different testimonies, even by the same people, in different circumstances, and it doesn't, say one's wrong and one's right. So at 8:44 in your movie, you say the 5 that were stood trial, which we just went over the names, were not likely at Carthage. We know that they're all there. Do you admit that Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp and those guys were there at the time of the murder?
Was Thomas Sharp there?
Huh?
Was Thomas Sharp there during?
Yeah, he was the first one back to the Warsaw house and said, I just came from Carthage where we killed Joseph.
So when he says that all 4 of the guys in the room were heavily armed, you believe that?
Did Thomas Sharp say that?
He sure did.
So he probably did. Then here's the deal though. Being a newspaper editor,
sorry. At the same time.
Sorry.
Let Justin finish.
I thought it was my turn.
I couldn't find the murder. I knew that was one of the biggest weaknesses of my theory is no murder weapon. John and Willard's accounts don't have them having guns. It has them just having canes. And I was like, I mean, that's a big problem with any crime if you don't have the murder weapon. I knew that was one of the.
So I read the Warsaw Signal. I've not heard Thomas Sharp claim.
Then I found Thomas Sharp admitted. He said they were all heavily armed, and I'm like, bam, there's the evidence.
Okay, so look, we only have like.
Where does it say that?
Hold on.
So that's in Thomas Sharp's writings after the fact. So I'll find that reference and send it,
please,
to all of you.
But it's immaterial because we're finding out that they were there, right? You're agreeing that your movie says it
no,
wrong.
That's if they were there. That because some of the people that were critics of that said, well, he wasn't even there. And I'm like, that's great to know he was there, because if he was there and knew they were heavily armed, that makes his testimony much stronger.
Who said he
wasn't
there?
So now we've just identified all 4 of them were heavily armed.
Okay.
Who said that he wasn't there?
So look, we only got like 10 minutes left. I have a
come on, we can go another hour because I want to know. You in minute 56, you say that you can't be a Carthage researcher without a theory of your own.
Yes.
You mean my wife, my kids, my cousins can't be Carthage researchers without a theory?
I think what he was trying to say is that it's such a salacious topic that you end up developing your own kind of theories because you get excited about it. Just like you can't study the JFK assassination without developing a theory of your own. Am I correct on that, Justin?
So, yeah, let me just say, Brian, you can do the next 100 of these, and I agree with all of them. I'm an idiot. I messed up. I said stupid stuff. So what? Can we talk about the evidence now? You fully discredited me. I'm the worst director.
I didn't say that at all, but I did say that there's we can't use.
Can we talk about the evidence?
Okay, hold on a second, Brian.
You're asking to use the same standards against this,
Brian,
and you don't want to have the
it's
same
my show.
standards.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I got a question for you now.
Okay.
So basically, all of this is a thing, and his 7 pages of notes and your 90 minutes of video are a thing. Right. Okay, and everybody's coming to my show to argue about this thing because I'm getting all kinds of emails and calls and super chats and comments from both sides of this argument, and I want this to be a friendly forum where we all can discuss this. What this boils down to, in my mind, the reason why this is such a passionate subject for everybody is because ultimately your film calls into question, shall we say, the validity of John Taylor and Willard Richards. So in the zeitgeist of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the biggest indictment of Willard Richards and John Taylor that we have currently right now is the movie Who Killed Joseph Smith. Now, some people lampoon it as recycled RLDS conspiracy theories. Some people lampoon it as pseudo-history. Some people just kind of admit it's a theory that comes out of gray area of improvability because it's so old. But either way, you have the biggest indictment of Willard Richards and John Taylor in those 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. So Brad, here's your question. Not Brad. Sorry. Brian, here's the question.
Okay.
His movie provides what he thinks is the best indictment of John Taylor and Willard Richards in those 2 or 3 minutes. According to all your research, which is superfluous and extremely credible and published, okay, what is the biggest evidence that exonerates the claims made in the movie that they didn't shoot Hiram Smith and Joseph Smith?
Okay.
So what's the biggest, I'm just going to repeat it, what's the biggest kind of exculpatory evidence against Justin Griffin's claims?
Yeah. It's before, during, and after people put their lives on the line, admitting and claiming that they did it. Can we put up John Hayes's claim at the end? This about the trial, the slide.
Yes, we can.
People claimed and went to their grave. Why would they do that? Enemies of the church, enemies of Brigham Young. The people who kicked Brigham Young out and the Mormons out of Hancock County went to their graves saying that they were involved with the killing.
Okay, is this the quote that you want on the screen?
No. It's the John Hay one from 1869, Atlanta Monthly.
Okay, you'll have to forgive us, Justin. I'll read this to you because I don't think you can see it on the screen while we're zooming. It's a flaw in my system.
Okay.
But anyway, this is from the Atlantic Monthly, 1869, John Hay. He said, quote, "There was not a man on the jury, comma, in the court, comma, in the county, comma, that did not know the defendants had not done the murder, but it was not proven, and the verdict of not guilty was right in the law." Okay.
Why would they say that? Why wouldn't they finger and say, you got the wrong guy, let's hang Taylor and Richards?
So
it's not plausible.
So are those 5 that were on trial, do you think any of them pulled the trigger, Brian?
Well, as Lamborn said, we don't have to know who pulled the trigger. We only have to know who the soul of the movement was. But Jacob Davis admitted that night.
5 of those guys that were on trial, did any of them pull the trigger?
Jacob Davis did, I believe. That's my opinion.
Okay, so nobody believes the other 4. Jacob, I would argue that, but maybe he did.
Okay,
Point
well, hold on.
They were not charged with killing Joseph Smith. They were charged for being in charge of the whole thing.
The conspiracy. We talked about that.
Wait, but hold on. I'm
the guys that actually believed pulled the trigger, they're the ones that all fled. So we didn't get them in the court.
Oh, okay, but so Justin, now you got something you got to deal with though, because I get that it's fair for you to say, I want to keep to the 2 or 3 minutes of what happened in the jail.
Right.
Because it seems that you agree it was a mob conspiracy and it was the mob that killed him. The question is just whether or not they had an alley-oop from John Taylor and Willard Richards, is what you're saying now, right?
Okay. So yeah, you're venturing into outside of the 2 to 3 minutes. Yes, I have theories on that.
Okay, well, no, I'm just saying though that your argument is simply that you agree that it was the militia and the mob, according to all of the overwhelming evidence outside of the jail, that he was propped up against the well and was shot by Levi Williams and the mob, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with that.
And so I think it's fair for you to say, look, I agree with that. That doesn't change what happened in the minute before, and that doesn't excuse my theory of what John Taylor and Willard Richards did, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Here's my only problem with that.
Didn't know that they were in on it either.
Okay, so I just asked him for what is the greatest evidence that's exculpatory evidence of John Taylor and Willard Richards in that vein, and he came forward and said the overwhelming quotes of people we know that were in the stairwell and surrounding the jail and were the co-conspirators, if your theory were true, all said we did it, and not one of them pointed to John Taylor or Willard Richards, which to me would be an overabundance. Like, just like in war, you have to win through overwhelming force. To me, isn't that overwhelming force of your theory, if not a single person pointed the finger at John Taylor and Willard Richards, except for, and then there was a bunch of people that said, we know for a fact here in Warsaw who did it, and it was us.
Right.
We did it. We want credit even.
Right. So I have one question to that. Why didn't they claim to have killed Hiram?
Why they did in one of the newspaper articles that we just read.
Yeah, and Justin,
July 10th, 1844.
Who claimed that?
Thomas
let me
Sharp?
pull it up.
Let's pull it up.
Yeah,
We'll read it right from the.
So here we go. Gosh, man, I wish you could see this, Justin. I'll read it for you again, buddy. But
we know Brigham Young wasn't in on it because they kicked.
Well, hold on.
Taylor
Let's just stick to this
Brigham Young.
before we go down to a rabbit hole.
Okay.
Justin, don't take the bait. You know what I'm saying? Don't go fishing quite yet. Here, we got to stick on this one thing.
Who says we have an hour?
Okay. So here we go. Which one do you want me to read here, Brian?
July 10th, 1844.
This one right here. We claim the community. Okay.
This is by Thomas Sharp, front page of the Warsaw Signal, July 10th.
Okay, this is front page material from the Warsaw Signal, which we know is the city from which the mob originated, and 4 of the 5 people in the trial against the state for the murder of Joseph Smith are still buried in the Warsaw not memorial graveyard, the Warsaw Municipal Graveyard. Okay. There's 2 of them. So it says this. We claim that the community in which we live, in a law-abiding community, and that it will go far to maintain the supremacy of law as any other community, our citizens have regretted and still regret the necessity that existed for taking the law in this particular instance into their own hands, but that it would sooner or later have to be done. No one acquainted with the facts of this case could deny. It was inevitable, and the only question was that of the proper time. In relation to this, we will remark that Joe and Hiram Smith were regarded as the only individuals that could hold together the Mormon community. They were the instigators and authors of all of our troubles, and back then troubles meant basically military conflicts, just like in Belfast it was called the Troubles when we talked about the internal conflicts between the Catholics and the Protestants. Anyway, the only alternative then was whether the guilty cause should be removed and the natural course of things suffer the evil to eradicate itself, or whether we should have waited until renewed aggression. And then they continue to talk about basically how the Carthage Greys were there and everybody was murdered, but they make specific mention that it was us, we did it, and it included Joe Smith and then a misspelled Hiram Smith in this front page of the Warsaw Signal.
Available for any reader to read.
Who shot John Taylor and who shot Hiram?
Well, that's, I mean, if there's 50 balls coming through the wall.
Right. So you're right, Brad. That's why I was like, well, I'm not cool with the mob. I want to figure out who actually, that's how, one of the reasons why I started it is to figure out who in the mob did it. Was it one of these 3 guys that got shot? Was it, who, did someone claim it later? It's not out there.
Well, no, but it seems like they are. These people in the front page of the Warsaw Signal are saying, we did it. We took the law into our own hands. Yeah. It was us and the Carthage Greys.
But they didn't.
But
no
Justin
one was in the room when Hiram and Taylor got shot, but Joseph and Hiram. They were the only one. No one saw how that all went down.
Okay, but to me that comes from a place, to me that comes from a gray area that becomes a Rorschach test. You can't physically prove nobody else was in that room.
Okay, I can't, but I can say Joseph shot 3 dudes first. Yeah. When he shot 3 of them, where do you think they went? You think they were just hanging out there watching? Or do you think they hightailed it back down the stairs?
Okay, I think next time you say that Joseph Smith shot 3 dudes, you have to say, like a boss. You know what I'm saying? So every time we talk about Joseph Smith shooting 3 dudes, it's a rule.
Brian, how many guys came up the stairs from the mob?
There's varying accounts. Why?
There's not. There's 1. How many? It was an eyewitness in the court case that said how many.
I can find more.
Where? Okay, tell
Baker's,
me.
LeGrand Baker.
Tell me how many.
There's varying accounts. But we do know that they were about, they can probably hand up about 6 guns at a time. They were loading them down at the base of the stairs, fireman brigade style.
So that's what the Lyon brothers theorized, but actual accounts of people, the eyewitnesses that saw how many people went into that building, it's 6 guys. No. 3 of which were shot by Joseph. So you tell me, Joseph starts unloading his 6-shooter. What do you do in that little spot? Do you hightail it back down the stairs, or do you just stay there and wait for him to run out of bullets?
That's not accurate. Three people on the stairs? Are you kidding me? I'm not buying
that. That is the eyewitness account from the court case.
Of who?
Who?
I'll get you. I can get you that too. It's there of all the eyewitnesses, or of all the people that testified at the trial. One, they asked him directly, and he said it was 6 people that went up those stairs.
Well,
no one else has ever testified.
They were saying nobody else. They didn't recognize anybody. I mean, it was a tainted. Of course, what do you expect from the testimony in Carthage? They weren't going to indict their
whenever
people.
Something doesn't go along with you, Brian. It's then that's no,
okay. Well, hold on. Don't worry about Brian. Justin, don't worry about Brian right now. Hold on a second, Brian. Just worry about me, dog.
Okay.
I do really call into question a theory that's based upon the testimony of somebody that hated the person that got shot and wanted to get all of the people that were on trial for shooting that person off of the hook. And in the pre-show, Brian, I'm throwing you a bone here now.
Okay, thank you.
I give you credit because you brought up some really interesting evidence that I think you should consider, Justin, that's probably going to be new to you that I didn't know about now that I've become a tangentially knowledgeable scholar on this now, just from all the weird little arguments I've had to get into about it. But there were pro-Mormons on that jury for that day. Because,
I know.
Well, that's the level 2 story that most of us are familiar with, okay? The level 1 story is the narrative people generally get at church, which is very truncated and short. The level 2 narrative is, oh, hey, there's all these extra details. But Brian here has done some pretty amazing research that I think you should be aware of, that the story I think you're going off of, we've gotten new light and knowledge about it, that that jury was selected because back then, all of the trials would get stuck in one day because the traveling judge was in town, and we have to get like a month's worth of trials done in a week because he's not going to be back for a couple of months. And because of that, they always took a jury of their peers from the surrounding area, which included anti-Mormons and pro-Mormons, in hopes of having a fair jury. But the original prosecutor didn't like the idea of pro-Mormons being on the case. And he said, this is an unfair trial. Under Habeas Corpus and the idea of a jury of your peers, I say that we have to vacate this jury and get a new one. And the judge goes, well, who would we choose? And he said, literally, we need to choose random people from this crowd. And the defense says, no, they're all anti-Mormons. That wouldn't be a fair trial. The trial would have to be dismissed. And the judge says, there's nothing normal about this trial. And then the defense says, that's unprecedented. And he said, this whole thing's unprecedented. And so he allowed the jury to get vacated, which most people don't realize, and then reselected amongst the anti-Mormon crowd. So now we know the jury was literally all mobsters who knew directly the families or the individuals in Warsaw who had shot the guy, and they all were willing to lie to get their friend off the hook. So if you're relying in your video off of these people's testimonies, and we've now found out that these anonymous jurors were actually anti-Mormon mobsters picked from the crowd at random, that's a serious indictment on the basis of a lot of your claims, is it not?
Cardon, brother, I love you.
Take a break.
Okay, hit me.
That's in the movie. That the juries got switched. It's in the movie. I covered that.
But it is presented as though John Taylor was trying to keep Mormons from testifying, right?
Yeah. Now this,
which
by the
confused
way,
me.
When you're talking about, I'm like, oh, this guy got shot in the stairwell, and you're like, no, he would have. That I love that discussion. I love your insights. Any of that, I love going back and forth. Now, on my claim that I didn't make the claim. John Taylor did tell people not to go to that court. Here's why it's important. Mormons showed up anyway. They were on the jury. They testified. Eliza, a 19-year-old Mormon girl, shows up anyway.
Yeah, but she had to be snuck in.
Of them? Nothing happens to any of them. So I'm like, what exactly was this big threat? I mean, the Mormons, if they wanted, could have hiked in there with 3,000 armed dudes and protected them and done the trial right.
Okay, pause.
But he says stay away, but Mormons go anyway and nothing happens. I'm like, what is the threat?
Okay, that's an audacious
Justin.
claim. That's an audacious claim. To me, that's as a person who had to wear a plate carrier to a freaking debate with RFM because of the psycho crap that we got behind the scenes.
Was that a gimmick, or you were literally worried
Dog,
about
we
your guys?
it's saved for evidence at this point in case something happens, and we can go into that later, dog. But let's go right now, because I bristle and I push back about somebody saying, well, what's your problem? There was no threat. Dude, they were burning us left and right. We were coming off the heels of the Hans Mill massacre, the Mormon War, betrayal by 3 apostles, a militia threatening to exterminate us. To me, there is more than enough of a valid claim to be honestly fearful of your life. So what's your response to that?
My response is, I'm
Brian.
like, cool. I'll concede. You're
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Great.
You know,
And I think-
sorry, Brad. If somebody once at the trial said there was only 3 guys there, Eliza Graham's aunt, Ann Fleming, said she didn't recognize anybody at the trial that was at her place that night. Of course, they were covering for their friends. So I'm going to throw that claim out. There's only 3 people on the stairs. If the truth would be known, they'd probably say there was nobody there. They'd want to because they didn't want any of their friends there. But in your movie at the 9:58 mark,
we bring up a piece of evidence. We bring up an eyewitness, and then we just question the heck out of it.
well, what was the context?
That I love.
In a court of law, they would look at the context of every witness and what they were doing.
Yeah.
And
For
here
me,
they had their
I
friends and
found
neighbors
the fact
on
that
trial.
He said nobody go to that court case. I found that suspicious.
Yeah, you
But
know
I
what?
didn't-
Well, hold on, let me finish.
Would John Taylor go there
Wait,
to
let him
Carthage?
finish.
Okay.
Hold on, let him finish.
So in the movie, I presented that fact, but I didn't pontificate on it a lot because what does it mean? I mean, what can you prove with that? Not a whole lot, but I do enjoy talking through that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for anybody interested, it's at the 9:58 mark of your movie, and you claim that the Mormons were told not to come to trial because they had secrets. John Taylor was terrified to return
What are
to
you
Carthage.
talking about? I didn't say that.
Yeah, that's
Secret? No.
Mormons told not to come to trial because John Taylor and Willard Richards had secrets.
Yeah, I didn't.
9:58.
say that at all.
I guess we can't pull that up.
Can't pull it up right now.
I will say
if
this,
I wrote that
as you
down
guys are
wrong,
going to pull it up.
Justin, I'll admit I may have written that part down
Okay,
wrong.
go to the next one.
But
You got
I
7
want to
pages.
just speak out on Brian's behalf here. That is 100% the way that it came across to me, and the way that it was presented in the video made it seem as though John Taylor was telling them not to go because he was trying to get them to keep a secret, right?
Yeah.
Which also doesn't make sense because none of them would have been involved in the conspiracy,
So,
right?
Brad, I didn't believe that at the time.
Yeah.
I still think it's suspicious. However, I concede the point. I'm like, yeah, I can see your point on that.
But the thing that I didn't like about it, Justin, was that it set up your audience to mistrust John Taylor before you come in with your theory saying that he was the one.
Yeah,
shooting,
I know.
right?
A lot of people are pissed off that the movie, I kept it interesting, for sure.
And I'm
could
not
have been
mad.
the most boring piece of crap scientific study of the whole. I have 10 million hours of footage, and I kept it interesting.
I respect
you
that
understand
answer.
that?
And you have to too, Brian.
Yeah,
He's like, just
absolutely.
because I'm a good showman doesn't
But I
mean
don't
that
have
you
to.
got to be
I'm
pissed.
not going to respect that answer, actually.
But Brad,
No,
but
just a
that's
second.
why I'm cool
Just a
with
second,
talking
Justin.
about it. That's why I'm
Just a
cool with
second.
talking about it with you.
Yeah.
I really do want to say, like, you can make it interesting in ways that don't misrepresent history, right? That's what I'm looking for in something that helps me understand history better, right?
Fair enough.
So if you're going to take the time to make it more interesting, I would say, and I know you guys have said something about working on a sequel, I would say be very careful in the next time that you're making something to not, in the name of making it
I
interesting.
think he's asking for a job, Justin. He wants to be your.
I'll be your
first-
diversity reader.
Yeah, he
You know
wants
what?
to be your first AC.
Come. I would love actually if you put the time in to study it and come and argue it with me.
And one thing I do want to say,
I would love that.
in addition to this, have you seen the Under the Banner of Heaven series recently?
I only watched episode 5 because somebody told me it had Carthage in it.
It does.
That and reviewed it. Yeah.
But I would say that they did the same thing you're just saying now, that they maybe embellished history to try to make things more interesting, right? Which
Boy,
I
did they.
think,
Yeah,
especially in a documentary, is
Yeah.
something you shouldn't do.
So I have two responses. First of all, I loved their Carthage scene. I think it's the best one anyone's ever done. It was beautiful. Like the look, the location, the act, it was beautiful. But they followed the eyewitness accounts exactly. And so I was like, okay, so they don't understand any of the problems today. But then they blame the whole thing on Brigham and John. I was like, where the crap did they get that from? So I don't know what.
So look,
I don't know how they made that connection just from watching that season. And then the rest of the show was so funky. I was like, this is Mormons? I was not.
Look, if even Justin Griffin is saying it was bad, I think it is proof positive that
I wasn't feeling the Mormon part, but the Carthage reenactment, I loved it, but it was highly inaccurate. But I love to look at it.
Okay, so we're going to press pause for a second here. Justin, do you got another 10 minutes, bro?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Because I got to read some super chats here. We got a couple of people who've super chatted us here, and I want to make sure that we don't miss these people. Okay. Thank you very much for the super chat. Ruruni 10 Shins. She says, great content, boys. That includes you guys, Brian and Justin. Okay. And then also Cleopatra 923 says, love this live with a heart. And I didn't even know that the emoji for the wise spectacle even existed, but I do now. So thank you very much, Cleopatra 923. Okay, so back to the boxing match here. So without doing gotcha questions, because I personally hate those as well.
Okay.
Can we just do really fast a pepper box? Dare I say a pepper box section? Brian, your top three questions to Justin here. Well, and Justin's in the hot seat with his cool flannel, and I don't even know what that shirt that cool. Hat company is.
This is breathable fabric for the summertime.
Oh, true that.
So, you know, if we just look at the 3 minutes in the jail, and that's what you want to do, so you don't want to talk about motives of the people involved. You've said that you just want the truth. What's the motive behind wanting the truth? There's got to be something. Is it to discredit Brigham Young, to stay in the church, discredit the church, John Taylor?
They want the truth of this question, or they want the truth in general?
Whichever one you want. I'll be fair.
So to want the truth of this question started with that Carthage Conspiracy video, wanting to know if that could have happened or not. Mm-hmm. So that was the genesis of the project. To want the truth in general, I mean, gosh, man. Versus living a lie, I mean, I gotta believe that things are better when you speak the truth. You say the truth and follow the truth, and that isn't easy. That
question number two. Then
easier to live lies sometimes, for sure. But
okay, question number two. Then, are all these accounts of the locals saying that they killed Joseph Smith? Is that not true? Did they lie to the whole world repeatedly throughout their lives and in their obituary?
I think they did. Yeah.
You think they did lie the whole time?
No, I think they killed him. When he fell out of the window, they lined him up and shot him. Yeah. And another guy smashed him in the face with his
But we're talking about people that have,
right.
I think he's referencing people that have claimed to have shot him in the room as well.
Who claimed that?
I wasn't really. I was talking about the mob. If there
was the mob that claimed they burst the door open, and then we were reading firsthand accounts, you and me, of people that said they shot through the door, and the people that said they winged him, we got him. There's people that bragged about having killed him, which would seem to fly in the face of
a conspiracy.
The conspiracy. I don't want to say conspiracy because to me that's pejorative, but of your theory that John Taylor and Willard Richards did it. Like, if we're going to use the testimony of John Taylor and Willard Richards and call it into question using good history and other primary sources, if there's somebody else bragging about having done it as well, and there's a lot of those accounts, doesn't that kind of outweigh the theory?
So, Cardon, I've answered that. I'll answer it again. The mob did do it. He was alive when they shot him outside of the jail.
No, I'm talking about inside.
So they don't claim to have no one claims to have made the shots to him inside the jail.
Well, the way I read it
from the eyewitnesses that said the mob did it, but the mob never said they did that.
Okay, because I guess then we're just getting into a semantic argument that might be hard to read history, and this might be a flaw of history, because the way I've written some of these firsthand accounts, it seems like these people are bragging about doing it in a way that would seem to not disprove, but go against your theory. And when there's enough of those, I guess the reason why I settle on the side of just trusting the John Taylor and Willard Richards accounts is because when there's enough evidence that goes against each other, it now becomes a Rorschach test in which you almost kind of choose to believe. And the very minimal physical evidence, such as the watch, you know what I'm saying? And the very minimal physical evidence, such as the door, or the one panel in the door that they actually took out of the old door and then put into the new door, you know what I'm saying? Seems to support more, at least in my mind, in my perception, the John Taylor and Willard Richards story. So much so that, like, without more solid stuff, I couldn't feel like I was being historically accurate to really say I took that seriously.
So I'm totally cool with that, brother.
Last question.
I think that's great. I think I didn't make a case that convinced you, and I totally get that. I'm not giving up. Yeah. I've got way more to add to it. I'm gonna. If
you take me out to lunch,
I'm a cheap date. I may never convince you. That's okay, man.
He likes. I have a question for you, Justin. So the next stuff that you're working on, it's going to go over this motive stuff, the things outside of the 3 minutes. Is that what's?
You will see soon.
Okay, he's got his third question. Brian gets his third question.
That was good, entertaining. Yeah.
And it kind of goes along.
Can I talk to Brad about that real quick, Cardon, please?
Sure. Yes.
About one.
Sure.
So I have an attorney friend who was very offended by the film. We were really good friends, and that kind of ended our friendship. And after he cooled down and came and watched the movie, he took all of his notes and he said, I want to give you feedback. I'm going to just tear this thing apart. And I was like, all right, brother, hit me with it. And he said, he said a lot of the things you said. You didn't approach this fairly. You didn't offer both sides. You swayed it with what your agenda was. Things like that. And he goes, that's unethical to do that. And I was like, okay, so attorneys at the end of a court case, when they're talking to the jury with their final, do they try to sway them to their side? And he goes, well, yeah, but that's unethical. And I was like, well, okay, but that's what they do. That's what I was doing. Yeah, I had my opinion about what happened, and I made the movie to sway it towards that. So yeah, I agree with. Maybe that's not fair, but that's what I did.
No, I totally understand. And I understand you're wanting to convince people of what you think is right. And I think that's fine. Right. I just think that's not going to be what convinces me, you know?
I didn't
convince
Brad.
Come across.
I didn't convince Brad, but I'm glad you give me the feedback because I'm like,
but I also think
I'm going to have a crazy apologist in there on your side. And then let's go back and forth and see, because then we can pit the two arguments together. And
it's going to be Brad. Just like the Backstreet Boys said, it's going to be May. You know what I'm saying? Now it's gonna be Brad.
Okay, I will shut up now. Sorry.
But the thing that I do want to say with it is, just don't present it as objective. Then, I would say, like, as you're going with it, and you're like, hey, we have this new theory. I think all of that's great. It's just it can't be like this is.
See, I take the opposite take. I say you go full bore.
Brad, in my defense, did I improperly cover the other theories? Did I sandbag them?
Well, you did use 6 arbitrary mileposts.
Okay.
In my opinion, that wasn't my third question, but in my opinion, I think you
Brad, when I did the other theories, was I unfair in my presentation? Did I explain them inappropriately? Did I not give them a chance? What's your take on that?
Oh, I think you presented them all right. I don't know. It's a little bit difficult that you set them up with a criteria that they didn't have in mind when they made it, right? So you had your criteria that you were going to use to prove your own theory in the end. And so subjecting them to a criteria that they didn't use, I think wasn't a great form of comparison.
Yeah, but if we're getting mad at freaking Justin Griffin for that, we've got to be pissed at Michael Moore. I think Justin, bro,
I am pissed at Michael Moore.
You go in full bore, full agenda. You tell it with all the snark and all the double-barreled shotgun attitude that you want, brother. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm not saying Justin did things wrong in defending what he thinks happened, right? I'm just saying, if you're trying to convince somebody like me, the best way to do that is to not to do what you did, saying like, here's our thing that we believe, and then say, this is the only thing, the evidence is this way, right? When it's really your interpretation of that evidence, right? And maybe that's just a semantic argument that me and your lawyer friend are more hung up on stuff like that than others, you know?
Okay, so last question.
I totally like that feedback.
And this may play into your next movie,
Last question
Justin.
from Brian.
This may play into your next movie, but you know, after all this happened, there was tensions higher in Hancock County than before the martyrdom. Groups were going around burning Mormon homes. Finally, John Wood and the Quincy Committee brokered a deal for the Saints to leave. 3 waves, 1846, Brigham Young, you know, the whole, they were not friends between the anti-Mormons, especially the mob in Warsaw, and Brigham Young. They never once said that Brigham Young, John Taylor, or anybody was helping them. They were conspiring to kill Joseph Smith. In fact, the mob eventually kicked the Mormons out. Do you agree with that there was not any conspiracy between them, that there was hatred between the mob and Brigham Young and John Taylor and Willard Richards? There's absolutely no collusion. You don't kick out your friends that you helped kill a common enemy with a year later or two without at least saying, yeah, we were once friends, but now we're not. We're kicking them out. They were enemies all the time. Would you agree with that? Is there any evidence against that? The mob versus the leadership of the Mormon Church after the martyrdom.
Again, I'll turn to the Book of Mormon.
No. I'm asking you to turn to Hancock County, 1845, please.
I'll turn to the Book of Mormon. With the Nephites and the Lamanites, whenever there was a Nephite dissenter that wanted to take over the power from the rest of the Nephites, and they were unable to do so, what did they always do? They went to the Lamanites and stirred them up to come and do the battle for them. That's what I think is going on here with those insiders.
Okay,
I think they have all these Mennonites out here living their life, doing their guard, whatever, and they get these guys come over, stir them up, which is the mob, by, hey, they're going to take away your rights, they're going to take your property, they're going to outvote you, they've got polygamy going. You know, stir them up to come and do the job for them because they couldn't take over the church themselves.
Okay.
That is a theory that I think could fit. Well, I don't know how confident I'm in that yet, but I think it could fit. And I think it's really interesting that same example plays out in the Book of Mormon so many times.
So he's saying that Brigham Young went and got Thomas Sharp to stir up the people? Is that what you're saying? What are you talking? Let's get specific.
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
He stirred up the mob.
Okay,
they hated him. They would have shot him.
Was stirring up the mob. And interestingly, the mob was like so ready. They had already been organized right when the expositor was destroyed. It's like, how did they get ready? How did they get a mob together?
We read it in the paper.
Okay, no, I get. Well, we know how they got the mob together because they published it in their own magazines, their own periodicals, how they did it. And I get the argument you're making, Justin. To shorten what you said, you're saying the enemy of my enemy is not my friend, but can be used strategically to go after my enemies. Yeah. I get that. There's plenty of historical precedent in and out of the Book of Mormon of that, okay? However, what I think Brian's concern here is, that is also kind of a question mark in my mind, is a secret as salacious as who killed Joseph Smith, with as many people were involved, with the loose lip culture of the 1850s, is utterly impossible to keep under wraps.
Yeah.
Yet there are no people claiming, there's almost literally historically nobody claiming in any of these, as authoritative as we can get, sources like the Warsaw Signal, that John Taylor and Willard Richards did it. Yet you based your entire movie and unfortunately, who knows, maybe it was fortunately for you, but your excommunication on that. Right. You know what I'm saying? So to me, that seems like Like,
So
I love you,
there's
dog.
Two big ones. There's two big ones.
Okay.
His sister and his brother both said they did it.
Repeat that. What'd you say?
His sister Catherine and his brother William both said those guys did it. So,
okay, what's the
and then, of course,
context,
all the
though?
Historians will write.
This,
I put that in the movie.
Yeah,
see
you
the
know
quote,
what? That's
Well, he asked a good
Yeah.
question. What's the context of
And
that?
I'll
Was
tell
it
you
under
what it
duress
is.
or not? Hold on a second, Brian.
So
Only one person can
Catherine,
talk.
it was 50 years later, gave an interview to a newspaper and explained that the last time she saw her brother Joseph alive, he was giving a sermon. He looked around, saw the guys on the stand, and he said, "These guys are gonna." I don't remember the exact word. It's right at the end of the movie.
Okay.
And he says, "These guys are the ones that are gonna kill me," and she says, "They did it, and then they took over the church." That was his sister.
Okay,
and then his brother William later on, same thing. He said, "These guys are the ones that did it."
Okay, my only frustration with that, and is that, man, you look at what W.W. Phelps said about Joseph Smith, not 50 years later, but like 50 days after they had their fight, and it was heinous, psycho, provable lies. To me, that just gets thrown back in the blender of a 50-year-old testimony of somebody who hated what happened during the succession crisis. Is like asking a Palestinian, you know what I'm saying, what they thought of the IDF person that
Every
arrested
time
their
you
dad
ask me a
50 years
question,
ago.
Yeah.
I give you an answer and you just, I'm like, okay. Like, you're the member on our first interview. You're like, well, wouldn't there be a bullet hole in the ceiling? And I was like, there was. And you're like, oh crap. And then you came up with something else. I'm like, dude, I have answers to all this. They might not be satisfactory. They might not be convincing to you, but I have my answers. But
that's fair. No, that's fair.
Again, for me, I love the
William
back and
Smith
forth
was
on the actual details, especially when someone stumps me, makes me think of something I didn't think. And I'm like, dude, you're right. I have to think that. There's been a couple of theories that have come out since the movie. People have reached out that stopped me. And I was like,
well,
oh,
that's
crap.
dude, you stole
That
the
could
words
actually
right out
work.
of my mouth. Dude, I was literally going to ask you. In the movie, you were like 100% confident. In our first interview with you, you kind of were like, I'm 80%.
Yeah.
What's your batting average right now in confidence level? Has it gone up or has it gone down? And
Since the movie?
yeah, and since our last interview where you said you were about 80%ish, I think you said. So has that gone up or down? And then if it's gone up or down, what new evidence since you made the movie has changed your opinion?
So I would say it's about the same because no new evidence has swayed that. But since then, I had a debate with a guy who came up with a new theory that rocked my world. It was good.
Hit us. Tell us.
What was it?
Okay, so
Hit us.
first
And we
of
will
all,
excommunicate you. We'll freaking take you back to the font, baptize your A right now, and we'll do it in your backyard, dog. No, I'm just kidding. Just keep going.
Swimming pool or something. Yeah.
So it's a combination of all three theories. So the Lyons brothers say one shot through here and exited out of here. Sam says it was shot in the back first. And then Gary at the end, really, he's saying he's shot in the back later. So Sam says he was shot in the back, fell to his knees, then had the shot in the side of his nose, then fell backwards, then had the shot in his chin. And this guy's like, no, he got shot in the back, fell to his knees, leaned forward, and had the one shot. So I'm like, holy crap, that is freaking awesome. The way that you put that together from the other two theories, no one has said that before. So when he first said it, he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, it's awesome, but I don't know how to respond to it. You've got to give me time. So I went and ran some tests, looked at the angles, and now I realize it can't be done. You can't look forward and get that shot from the distance from the door where it doesn't penetrate the nose, exit the chin, and hit him somewhere else in the body. And he wasn't hit anywhere else in the body. Plus, he and Sam, they both rely that first shot in the back, there's no blood. And they're like, well, it just didn't have to bleed. You know, the ball bounced around inside and he bled out on the inside, but he never bled. So Sam says he fell back. He got shot in the back and fell backwards and didn't bleed, even with gravity or even with his heart still pumping. And I'm like, no, this guy's like, he fell forward. And that's why there's no blood. And I'm like, even with his heart still pumping, the Gary's the one that went into the full detail of there is no blood around those shots. And he went and had his pathologist look at it that said it's impossible. His heart would have already had to have stopped in order to not bleed out of that back. So then they have a second tier opinion or theory, which is when they were put in the coffins, they were put on ice to preserve the bodies to take them back to Nauvoo. And so that ice melting is where that's what took the blood out of his clothing. I'm like, all right. So I'm running my own tests on that now. I'm like, it's not a bad theory. It's not a bad theory. So I'm running tests to see if that's possible, because most people say once blood sets half an hour, you're done. And it would have been much longer than that before they were put in the boxes and taken back to Nauvoo. But so I'll let blood dry at all different times, then set it on ice, and we'll see what happens. If it comes out, I'll be like, bam, you've got something there for sure.
Okay. So any last things you gotta know, Brian? Any oh, and I gotta read any last super chats. Hold on. Guys, audience, this is your last chance. If you got any burning questions for Justin Griffin, BT Witbeck, Prophet, Seer, Revelator 2026, you know what I'm saying? Or for Brian J. Stutzman, author of Warsaw, Illinois, including the Mormon period, for those of you that are just tuning in. If you got any last questions for the director of Who Killed Joseph Smith, or the author with the counter narrative to the counter narrative, this is so meta, Justin. You know what I'm saying? We're getting counter narratives of counter narratives here. Make sure you give them right now in the chat. So one last question, Brian, hit it. You're in the hot seat. One last question in the hot seat, Justin. Fourth question. It's a bonus.
Mine?
Because you've been well behaved, yes.
I've tried to be. Thanks, Justin. Anybody who didn't follow Brigham Young West, every group from Strangites to Bickertonites to Lyman White, who went to Texas, to Zodiac, Texas, to start a temple at the Zodiac Temple. That's pretty cool. We could do a podcast. Every one of them have tried to find
Zodiac Temple, like the Chinese Zodiac.
Well, the town was called Zodiac, Texas.
Oh, I was thinking, dude, this is California. There's like cities named Zodiac, killers named Zodiac, chicks on the street corner with holistic bars named the Zodiac Bar.
So every one of those groups traces somehow their lineage, their religious lineage back to Joseph Smith, to the succession crisis. James Strang said he was received a letter of appointment as well as an angel ministering to him the very hour that Joseph was martyred. Sidney Rigdon had the showdown in the Groves. My ancestors were there and was convinced the mantle fell to Brigham Young. He took people back to Pennsylvania. Lyman White went south. Of course, some feel that the church was in disorganization. So on April 6, 1860 at Amboy, they took Joseph Smith III and ordained him to be the prophet and reorganized from a disorganized state. I've read a little bit about the doctrine of Christ, and I don't see any genealogy. Even the people at the creek, Short Creek, Colorado City, go back to John Taylor, and they think they're practicing the principle of polygamy, and they feel that the manifestos were wrong. So, it's kind of like the old Christian thinking you could get a true church from a dead church. I understand that you guys think that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from John Taylor on, including those that came west, even Russell M. Nelson is not a true prophet. Where's your lineage back? Every other group, including the Community of Christ with Stephen Vesey as their prophet today, can trace their lineage back. Somebody said you guys have some reincarnated people or something. Can you just, I'm lost. I do not know the facts here. Lyman White's reincarnated, a guy named Phil or something. Can you tell me a little bit about your group that's behind all this?
Okay, so what I'm getting from that question is continue to try to figure out ways to discredit me personally.
No, I asked you a question about
my theory.
I think what he's trying to say is that all these other churches have a genealogy that dates back to the succession crisis.
No, that's not what he's trying to say, bro. He's trying to. This is what we've interacted many times before.
About 5.
He used to come on my
5 times
Facebook page,
chat.
which I was fine until he started berating all of the people on there, and I had to block him. And I'm like, Brian, what is your deal, dude? He asked to come onto my movie. I'm like, go figure out the 2 to 3 minutes, and I will talk to you about. I'd be happy to do that. He doesn't want to do that. I'm like, we have a history.
Dude, I
here.
begged for you to be on tonight. Give me some credit. I asked Cardon 8 times.
That's true.
So yes, and you said the same thing to Jacob, and I said I don't want to go on and talk about the before and the after. If you guys want to study Warsaw and you want to talk motivate, Brian is your guy. Like I said, I learned a lot from Brian. That's where I learned about Eliza Graham. It's good stuff. But if you want to talk about the 2 to 3 minutes, that's not Brian's expertise. Find somebody else who that's their expertise, or find someone at least that will talk about the evidence. And then I'm like, now I'm helpful. Now I can.
And you found Taylor Smith.
Yeah. So Taylor Smith was a great example. He actually went and studied it. He's the one that came up with that theory.
But I was asking if I could ask a question.
Two fantastic conversations.
Okay, cool. So then the Doctrine of Christ folks, are you just kind of basically saying we don't trace lineage back to the succession crisis, similar to how Joseph Smith claimed revelation, and that he's not
I am not a part of the Doctrine of Christ group.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're the remnant. I forgot. Yeah, you're the remnant.
And have you read 3rd Nephi 21
Yeah,
yet?
but now I'm confused,
Is remnant Denver Snuffer movement?
So they took the name remnant when I'm not a part of any movement.
Well, and then there's the Kansas
3rd
City
Nephi
remnant
21,
church.
there is the remnant of Joseph and there's the remnant of Jacob. And what does it take to be a part of the remnant of Jacob? You have to be redeemed. You have to receive your first comforter. That's the remnant I'm referring to. I'm not referring to any group that's taken any name or anything like that. It's just straight out of the scriptures, that term.
Okay, so it's not the one that's in Kansas City that has to do with the dude that went down there. Okay,
it's
cool.
3rd Nephi 21, bro.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, dude, there's like 17 remnant. I mean, there's like 17
Yeah,
sects.
I'm not a part of any of it.
Okay, cool.
I know all of them. I love them all. They're all great people, but I am on my own.
Okay, cool.
So what's your genealogy?
So, anyway, this was awesome. Dog, you survived.
I have one last question.
Okay, fine. One last question, Brad. Then we got to go.
And maybe it's just been too long since we looked at it. But why not? We can just do a different episode on it on another time.
Cool.
We've
So
gone long enough.
I have one last question.
Hit it.
Brad, join me for part 2. Go study it, dude. I will give you all my notes. I'm hiding nothing. Bring all your experts. Join me as the other side. I would love it. Someone that can argue on this level, I would love it. Someone who just pokes fun at me and says minute 1.30, it doesn't advance.
Oh,
anything.
hold on. I don't think that's
But
what he's
if you
doing. I think he's
actually
just
go
trying
for
to.
it, dude, then I'm like, cool.
I think he's just trying to be exact so that our audience can make sure that he goes back.
No, he's not. His whole
you can't impugn motives. I won't let him impugn yours.
So that the theory falls apart because he has nothing to say about the 2 or 3 minutes. We've been these rounds, bro. I've done this with him already. It doesn't go anywhere.
You're both friends of the show, and I understand your quirks. You know what I'm saying? He has a quirk that we will work on, just like you have a quirk that we will work on, okay? Which is standing to the right slightly of the center of your Zoom call, which the whole entire time has been kind of bothering me. But I'll be honest, I didn't say anything until now. No, I'm just kidding. So, awesome. Where can people find you if they want to watch your stuff and hear your bold claims? Justin, that was for you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, so we're talking about the movie today. It's whokilledjosephsmith.com.
Okay, cool. So just go to whokilledjosephsmith.com and then all the contacts and everything they need to find you there.
Yeah, and then I have a YouTube channel just under Justin Griffin. And anytime I did a debate with Taylor, I put that on there. I did commentary on episode 5. I put that on. So I put little things like that. But the movie itself is whokilledjosephsmith.com.
Okay, cool. Sick. And then, Brian, where can people find you and all your crazy, cool, awesome scholarship?
Just the book. I'm not here to sell it. In fact, when I did it, I never thought I'd have to resurface it because I never thought it was even questionable.
You are the worst salesman known to man. Here is Justin saying, yeah, I might have told a one-sided story to be a better showman. And then and he's pimping his shiz with a .com. And you're like, don't go buy my book. I'm too humble. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's an awesome book.
It is.
It's Warsaw, Illinois, including the Mormon period. This guy's such a good scholar on the mob and the Nauvoo/Warsaw period of that mob, specifically the city they're in, that I don't think you can survive understanding the Nauvoo period without it at this point.
Thank
so, awesome. Anybody else got anything else to
thanks
say
for
before we
having
go?
me on,
Brian,
Justin.
send
It's
me
nice.
the quote where Thomas Sharp was outside of the jail. I need that so bad.
Yeah, I think it's in Murder Prophet. But thank you, and I hope that you'll update your movie now that you have admitted that we're on the same side, that the mob did kill Joseph Smith. That's the answer. That's the answer. It should be on your website. Thank you. Justin, it's good to see you. I appreciate your time. It's nice to see you in person. We have had 5 or 6 exchanges. Best of luck to you, Justin. Bye-bye.
All right, dude. Catch you guys later. This is Midnight Mormons. See you guys in the next program. Okay, so hold